What's up, everybody? Welcome to tonight's episode of Pigskin Profits. This is episode number 4, and we are your hosts. I am Nick Sisson, and that is Tyson McCallum, otherwise known as Recruit Radar PN Dub on Twitter. What's up, Tyson?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty good, man. Just a little bit late off the starting gun here. Hoping to have a strong, back half, strong finish, making the turn to the back nine here.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, can't believe we're already 3 weeks or about to be 3 weeks in.
You're telling me, man, it's already 9/11, pretty soon we're going to be falling back the clocks and it's going to be dark at 4:30.
I know. I hate that.
Yeah.
One thing Arizona has on us.
Yeah, continuous clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it ain't bad for them, that's for sure. So you may notice that as of this moment in time, we are one profit short of a trio. Devin had something come up here, and we're just going to wait for him to join a little bit later on. But we're going to start the show here. Sorry for the delay, but the good news is that you can go back and rewatch it at any time, and nobody's missed a damn thing so far. Tyson.
Yes, sir.
First thing I want to say here is that non-high school football related. I picked Wisconsin, or excuse me, I picked Washington State to beat Wisconsin. Like, how big of a slap in the face is it to the Cougars? It's where they beat, the team that's played for a couple of Big Ten, whatever they want to call themselves, championships in recent years, and then they don't even get an invite to the conference. It's almost like that they're afraid of them.
Well, 2 years in a row. Didn't they beat them last year too?
Yeah, they won in Madison, and then they won at Washington State this year, which is a big reason why I picked them. Yeah. Speaking of picks, I know we're going to go through like our picks here in just a little bit. But yeah, Pigskin Profits is also featured in the Daily News. Our show is powered by the Daily News here in Cowlitz County and beyond. And last week in the local pick'ems, Tyson, your boy 13-2. Take a guess on the two teams I missed on.
Well, did you guys have to pick Seahawks game?
No pro games, just college and high school last week.
Oh man, they're probably small schools. I didn't even know what the game was.
Nope, the schools I cover.
Oh geez, was that 2 weeks in a row?
Yeah, I'm 0-4 if it involves Aria Long and Mark Morris. I did pick Kelso this last week, and they did get back into the win column there. So I mean, I did pick up one there, but other than that, yeah, it's been kind of rough, but. Yeah.
Well, you're going to have
to, though, overall, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you're going to tell the Gridiron Grump that you don't have bias towards the teams you actually are allegiant to. You're a non-homer.
Or I'm a non-correct picker, one of the two. Yeah,
hey,
all of the above.
You can't win them all. If you do, that's pretty impressive.
No, obviously you can't win them all. But anyway, man, it was a pretty busy week overall last week. A lot of shocking results. Overall in different ranks and such. I mean, yesterday, I lump yesterday into last week. The Seahawks getting blasted at home by the Rams. I mean, who saw that one coming?
Especially after that drive where we didn't even have a third down.
Yes, game started great.
Then we get 3 yards in the second half. I mean, you lose your bookend tackles. That's a tough one for a guy like Gino, who has been pretty used to good protection obviously since he took over. They both had great rookie years, but hopefully it sounds like Cross is okay, but the Archbishop alum
Lucas.
Lucas, it sounds like his knee might be bothering him a little.
Oh, I mean, after a game like that, you just lick your wounds and get ready for the next one. And the next one's at Detroit. They had good success last year. I think last year it was their top offensive game of the season. So hopefully
we'll see that coming this week. We'll see though. Detroit looked good in that Kansas City game.
Yeah, but Kansas City was down Travis Kelce, and
Yeah, but she still got by far, on average, the best quarterback in the league. So, I mean,
yeah, they'll bounce back. It's just
we'll see.
We've always had a Rams problem. Yeah, the Rams have always given the Seahawks problems.
If I had a team that was my favorite from a style standpoint, it is Detroit. So,
sure,
that's what makes me nervous in that game.
All right, well, let's talk a little high school football. Last week, week number 2 in Washington State high school football. And we pick 20 games each week between myself, Tyson, and Devin Record, who is not in the frame at the moment. But let's go over the numbers, Tyson. You've got them probably in front of you there. How did we all finish last week?
So it came in this last week, and then our totals. So I finished at 16-4 last week. Nick, you were in second, 15-5, and Devin sat at 500, going 10-10. So overall, through 2 weeks, the standings are as follows. I am in first at 30-10. You are at 27-13, and Devin at 24-16.
Well, the good news is at least we all have winning records.
Yeah. Hey. Okay. Devin's like, oh man, I'm falling way behind. I was like, well, Nick struggled week 1 more than us. Devin struggled more last week. It'll probably be my turn this week. So
yeah, let's hope
that's how I feel looking at some of these games.
Well, I got the sheet in front of me as to what games we picked and what the results were. So let's just do a quick rundown here and see what stands out to us here mostly. In no particular order. Camas and Glacier Peak. This one went to the road team in spectacular fashion. I'll admit here, I got this one wrong, Tyson. Camas did ride that strong performance against Yelm the week prior to where they took the defending 3A state champs down to the final play. Couldn't come up with the win at home there, but they go to Glacier Peak and just dominate them 55-20. Camas is probably one of those teams that's been slept on, heading into this season a little bit. And I think that we really didn't know what we were going to get out of them, but they've had an exponentially better start this season than the year prior. They lost 46-6 last year at Yelm. They turn around and almost win that game in the first week of the season. They got beat at home by Glacier Peak last year, and then they go to their building and beat them by 5 touchdowns. Super impressive win there for the Papermakers.
Yeah, a totally different team this year. I mean, so far, last year, 6-4, losing their first 3 games. Granted, they were as stiff a competition as you're going to get in those first 3 games. And then obviously getting knocked out of the playoff against North Creek in the last game of the year for them, to fall to 6-4. But, beat a lot of those other teams they played last year like they probably should have. But it's like that 0-3 rocky start there. You can tell the guys that were around last year definitely took that to heart and have not allowed them to get off to a slow start this year.
Yeah, we'll see where the journey takes the Papermakers when it comes to their league with Skyview and Battlegrounds kind of upstart right now. Battlegrounds at 2-0, Union stumbling out of the gate. But, you can say that about a lot of teams if your first 2 games are against O'Day and Yelm. So, I don't think we should count Union out quite yet. But that's a tough league this year, the Greater St. Helens 4A. So we'll see what comes of Camas by the time the season ends. But they do play a lot of tough games throughout the year, and really interested to see where Camas is at, mid to late this season. The next game on the docket you were at Tyson, and boy, it was a long one. 15-14, Moses Lake on the road at Kamiakin. Tell us what it was like.
Yeah, it kind of started off. You could tell Moses Lake was kind of asleep to start the game. I want to say they had a rough go of it the whole game at the line of scrimmage from a pre-snap penalty standpoint, whether it was jumping off sides and causing encroachment or false starts. I want to say they had about 5 false starts in the first half, but overall, Kamiakin jumped out to it. They scored on their first drive, and it was 7-0 right away. And then it was kind of just a slog in the middle of the field for the rest of the first quarter. Then with 27 seconds left in the first quarter, the refs called the game for lightning that was moving by to the southeast of us, kind of probably practically in Walla Walla. But it was only supposed to be a half-hour delay from, the last lightning since the lightning strikes, essentially when they do that tally and running repetitive clock, I guess I should say, but turned into a 90-minute delay. And then Moses Lake came out and scored 15 points in the second quarter, and shortened halftime was 5 minutes long. And then in the second half, it was kind of the same slog that it was in after Kamiakin scoring the first quarter. Kamiakin was able to punch it in on another running touchdown, and then it was just turnovers. I think Moses Lake turned the ball over twice on 2 picks, but then they caused 3 turnovers backed up towards the red zone where Kamiakin was threatening to take the lead and came up clutch every time. That was really the game.
Yeah, I mean, the first 2 games I was wrong on. I had Kamiakin winning that one. How much of a factor do you think that the Lightning played comparatively for both teams? Do you think it affected one more than the other, or both equally?
I would say both equally. Moses Lake definitely started much faster after the delay. And Kamiakin was pretty loose during the whole delay. Like, they were outside the locker room practically the entire time, just sitting on benches and hanging out. And I want to say the first half hour, at least, Moses Lake spent in the locker room. Then slowly started to leak out of it after about 45 minutes. And then, had the team hanging outside. It looked like it was definitely going to get canceled at that point. And then all of a sudden, 10 minutes was down onto the clock, and they let the game go on. And I think Moses Lake came out with that quick strike aerial attack that converted a little bit higher rate than Kamiakin's did overall. And ultimately, that was the difference in the game. Neither team really ran it all over one another. I want to say Kamiakin's running back, it's kind of funny name. Not funny, but it's tough to spell. But he had the 2 touchdowns for them, but otherwise he didn't break off anything more than 20 yards, and that was early. So it was just that, Brady J converting on a few of those deep throws, and they got a couple PI penalties drawn. So that chunk plays, really.
Well, Moses Lake definitely proved that they are ready to compete with the big boys, so to speak. Kamiakin getting a lot of respect after their comeback win against Chiawana in week 1 in overtime. And depending on what rankings you're going off of, and this example is not Pacific Radar PNW, but there's a couple, I'll say one specific ranking out there on SB Live that's got Kamiakin 7, Chiawana 9, and Moses Lake on the outside looking in. I mean, what kind of guerrilla math is that? I mean, you're saying that the team that you think is the best of the 3 is ranked higher than the team that beat the team ranked highest of the 3, while the other one beat the one ranked 9th. I don't. We'll see, I guess. But Moses Lake doesn't play Chiawana this year. They've already played Kamiakin. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know what the Chiefs Mavericks can do, other than go on the road and win a game in which, there's severe weather affecting it, and rhythm played a huge part in the game. So I guess I just don't understand what more you want to see from them in terms of a head-to-head comparison. The game wasn't in Moses Lake. It's not like Kamiakin got out of there with a 1-point loss. They had the home field advantage, and they were probably favored going into the game last week. So I think Moses Lake is kind of getting snubbed on that end.
Yep. Hey, I'll vouch for him if nobody else will.
Well, I know you will.
I have since the beginning of the year, and the biggest game they have from here on out will probably be Sunnyside and Eastmont. So those will be their big tests. But as far as I'm concerned, Kamiakin was the highest ranked team by anybody on the eastern side of the state, and they beat them, so it should be de facto.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Prosser at Skyline, not really close here. Skyline ends up dusting off the Mustangs 56-21, another 5-touchdown spread in that one. Quite a big jump for Prosser, though, to take on a 4A team on the road in week 2. I don't think that this necessarily discounts Prosser from being a team in 2A that can contend come playoff time. The Kingco itself in 4A is completely undefeated. There's not a single loss up and down the league. So I wouldn't look too much into that result if you're Prosser. And if you're Skyline, that's a win that you probably should have, and they handled it very well.
Yeah, definitely. Skyline, I think, is probably a better team than people thought they would be this year. I mean, Wenatchee just beat Mount Baker, but Skyline beat them 42-7 week 1. And, yeah, I mean, Prosser going on the road for that game, big environment, big school. It's not one I would say proved who they are. It's more a 4A team that has a rich history did what they should have.
Yeah, I don't know what really conclusions you can draw from that game for either team. Anytime that you've got a 2 classification difference, most cases, you're not really going to learn a whole lot, except when it's like Nooksack Valley taking on Mountain View and they beat them 2 years in a row. That's something that you can look at and be like, okay, Nooksack Valley is definitely a very, very good team, in the state of Washington as a whole. And when it comes to 1A competition, of course, they're, amongst the cream of the crop. Whereas Macho Man would say the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, certainly, especially because they beat them by more. But, yeah, Prosser is I expect them to give any team in that league a run for their money, especially after what I've seen just locally.
Let's move on. This is a game that all 3 of us ended up having correct last week. Washougal at Toppenish. I will say, though, as a sub note, that I wasn't nearly as correct as my pick indicates. I thought that this game would be much more competitive, but it turned out to not be. Washougal ends up winning it 37-8. I guess I just don't really know what to make of Toppenish now at this point. I know that they've probably fallen out of favor in a lot of different rankings, including your own, for good reason. Washougal, I think it's time to really start taking them serious as a contender beyond maybe a playoff win or 2. I really do. Depending on how matchups go, their defense is a lot more improved this year than it was last season, which spells trouble for a lot of teams. If they can get stops and get off the field on a regular basis and hold teams to that 30% third down conversion rate, they are going to be very, very tough for just about anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I just love how they have that dynamic connection of B to Evers, and there's a few examples of teams in the state that have that same thing where they've got a top flight receiver in their class and quarterback, and I think anytime you have that has a consistent rapport for connecting every game, it's going to make you a threat over teams that might be better top to bottom. Sure. But that win for them was about as sound as it gets for being on the road as far as a road trip as that is for them.
Yeah, I mean they're overcoming demons. I won't say it was really a demon, but Toppenish gave them a beating last year at Washougal. If I remember, it was 42-20 in that game, and so to go on the road and return the favor in the fashion of which they did, They're getting good play all around, Tyson. They're getting good play on the offensive line. They're getting good play on the defense overall. I mean, we knew about how good their quarterback was, and we know how good his, targets are that he can throw the ball to. So I really don't know what else to say about Washougal other than I think that they could probably, figure out a running game, I guess, a little bit more down the road to complement B and company. And if they're able to do so, I mean, like I said, look out, man. They could end up being a problem for just about anybody. So.
Yeah, they got a pretty solid defense so far this year too, as far as kids that can run around and make plays in the passing game and like to hit. So, probably have a run similar to last year where we'll find out more as the season goes on. But they've taken care of their first 2 weeks just fine.
Let's move on to another game. I also thought this game was going to be a little bit closer, but it didn't turn out to be. Yeah. Tumwater at North Kitsap. Tumwater ends up winning it 34-14. I'll get to stats later because I want to run it all together with all the athletes around the state. But, man, I tell you what, North Kitsap has hanged its hat, so to speak, on playing defense the last couple of seasons. And Tumwater, has predominantly been a running the ball team, and they were able to find some success throwing the football and really, really dissecting the defense that North Kitsap put out on the field that day. A 20-point home loss. I mean, last year Tumwater beat them by 1 at home, and this time on the road winning by 20. I think Tumwater is very, very improved over last season. I picked them to win last week. I believe you did also. So,
yep.
What were your impressions on that one from the T-Birds?
Just a more complete team. North Kitsap's got a good defense, but if a team's going to score, I think over 25 to 30 points on them, they're going to have a hard time. They're notorious for most of their games being generally low scoring last year. I want to say the Linden game is one of the games they scored the most in that, was against a for sure quality opponent. But Tumwater can run, they can throw, they got big kids on both sides of the ball. They really don't have a weakness, is from what I can see so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're a little bit better than what some people think out of them in terms of where they're ranked at. I would not have an issue if they appeared in, say, the top 3 in 2A. I think that they're realistically right there. And, we're going to have them in our pick'ems again later on in the show. I think the sky's the limit ultimately for Tumwater also. I mean, it's kind of looking like you got Tumwater and Washougal as the 2 1 seeds from the District 4 leagues in 2A. And that'd be a really exciting matchup if those two teams had a date maybe in November. So I don't know which way I'd lean on that one personally. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you mean as in Tumwater and North Kitsap having a matchup later on in the season?
No, Tumwater, Washougal.
Oh, Washougal. Sorry, I missed that team.
Hypothetical, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, I think with a quarterback like B, you're capable of almost anything.
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't see many weaknesses in Tumwater right now to where a team that's a little bit more one-dimensional. I don't like those odds so much, which is pretty much how I looked at last week. I mean, North Kitsap has Sloman. I don't know who's playing quarterback there this year. The kid that was playing in the playoffs last year was originally quarterback 3. So I knew they would have a good defense, knew they have a great player that plays both ways, but the defense was a strength, making them feel one-dimensional, and I feel similar to Washougal in comparison to Tumwater. I think Tumwater's in for a revival this year.
For sure. Championship game removed just over a season ago. So yeah. I mean, they're not too far off. That's for dang sure.
Yeah, and they ran into a tough Cedar Woolley team last year that just really played probably one of their best games of the season against Tumwater.
For sure. We'll talk a little bit about them later on in the show also. Let's move on again. Mount Si and Spanaway Lake, the Wildcats of Snoqualmie, got a chance to play for the first time this year, and they looked fresh. And they were really balanced as well. 41-7 win over Spanaway Lake. It's another one of those crossover matchups for a 3A. I don't think it's doom and gloom for Spanaway Lake here, going up against a team that's playing their first game of the year. Mount Si, though, they look pretty balanced, at least on the huddle film.
Yeah, and first start for a new quarterback, sophomore Nate Donovan, that is one of many good quarterbacks that work with Malachi Durant's dad, Lavelle. He's talked about him a lot since the summertime and hyped him up as one of his favorite players. And I think I don't have him down on my numbers, but I know he passed for over 200 yards in his first varsity start, and to score 41 points in a game where it seems like 220, and maybe I think he had a touchdown. That means the quarterback didn't even have to do that much, but he's supposed to be as talented as he is. They have a lot of good guys around him too. So only having one game played so far, it's a good opponent, and I don't think Donovan turned the ball over, and Darian Clemens is on the other side of the football, so that alone is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Mount Si, again, one of those teams from the Kinko that's, hasn't lost yet. I'm really looking forward to how that league shakes down, and, for Spanaway Lake, I think that they've done a good job. Excuse me. I think they've done a good job of testing themselves so far in non-conference play. And I'll be interested to see kind of how things go with the league play mixed in there with, oh gosh. Yeah, it's slipping my mind off the right top of my head. For some reason, I'm thinking Yelms League, but that's not it. It's the other one.
They're Gig Harbor and
no, Gig Harbor's is in South Sound with Peninsula, Yelm, and Timberline, and Capital. So I'll have to pull it up here, but
they're Pierce County.
Yeah.
Lincoln Lakes.
Yes. Yeah,
Stadium's 2-0, but Lincoln
Lakes is getting a lot of respect right now. Lakes and Lincoln are the two teams that those
Mount Tahoma. Yeah. They're getting a lot of respect too.
Yeah, exactly. There are others to consider at 0-2.
Yeah. Hey, they've played tough their first two games.
Sure, they played two tough teams. Sure. I agree with that. Yep, they played two tough teams. Speaking of tough teams, there's a lot of them always in the South Puget Sound 4A league. And let's go there. Curtis at Sumner. I had the Spartans of Sumner in that game. And, if it wasn't for a guy named Rocco Koch on Curtis, we might be talking about a Sumner victory, but we're not. We're talking about Curtis being 2-0 now, and Koch just continues to dominate. He can kill you with his legs, which he did against Sumner, and he's not a bad passer either. And he's overcome a lot of adversity in life as well.
Yeah, definitely. He's like, parallel-wise, he's like Jalen Hurts at Alabama. I mean, I think he had 28 carries in that game, and anytime they needed an answer, they got it. And I learned something from that article, man, they wrote. Like you said, a lot of adversity in life, but just let's clear the air now. It's actually Rocco Koch. Never knew that. Yeah. I've always said Koch too, but I didn't imagine. It must go back to some old, I don't know where that, Germany maybe. I'm not sure, but yeah, Koch Koch. But I mean, like some of the coaches have said, he might be the best player in that league, and that's high praise because that league's as stacked as they come.
Yeah, with Super Alice and Skokel, and those
right.
couple of pretty good quarterbacks. I mean, if I remember correctly,
he might be the best running back in the league.
Is Spurbeck in that league as well?
Yep. Yeah. And then you got Malik, all the wide receivers that are so good.
Sure.
Yeah, that's pretty high. When a guy can kill you for 400 plus yards every single night, that's tough to stop. Doesn't seem like nobody can stop him so far.
Yeah, Curtis is off to a really good start, and you probably couldn't drawn it up any better for them, taking on a team in Sumner that has been very tough over the last few years. That's a really good win for Curtis on the road, and
very good.
Considering that there's going to be tough matchups still down the road with GK and ER, that's a huge win for them to go on the road in Sumner, a very tough place to get a win and come out alive with it. So, can't tip of the cap to
and can't help but root for him too, because he is as much as adversity as he's been through, and how uphill of a battle that league is. He's about as level-headed and cool of a kid that I've gotten a chance to have a few words with over the last 2 years too.
Let's move on to another game that was really good. Lake Stevens and Bellevue. And, we talked about it last week, at least you and I did, about how Lake Stevens, if they need a win, they can throw the ball a little bit better than Bellevue. And it turns out to be, one of the big differences. I mean, Bellevue riding the horse that they've gotten Ruben, but it's Lake Stevens that ends up coming up with the furious comeback, down 21 at the half. It was 28-7 at the break. And, according to what I read on the game report is, coaching staff was not happy with the effort put forth in the first half. And he really went into the locker room and challenged his guys to lay it out on the line, no matter what the result was by the end of the ball game. He just wanted to see his guys lay everything out, and they end up doing that. And they come away with the win, 34-31. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it was a heck of a comeback. I think Matson just made multiple, play after play, kind of like he did against Garfield, and it's really cementing himself among the elite when it comes to quarterbacks in the state. Last year he was just a sophomore starting his first games, and now he's had to basically become the guy. I know Lamar is still Jaden's little brother. Jashawn has been plenty productive, but that team is Matson's, and down 28-7 to sling your way back into it and take the lead. That they might be a better team than last year because of that, having that ability to, shrink a deficit like that against a team as good as Bellevue too. That's what's so impressive about it. But I think we both had Lake Stevens in that one. Actually, we all three did. Yeah.
Oh, Devin accidentally chose that one too.
Yeah, well, he said, I remember seeing he said that he wanted to take Bellevue because he has Bellevue pick to win the state championship in 3A, but he ended up choosing Lake Stevens.
I mean, there's still time for Bellevue. I mean, they've played two really tough games. So.
Started 0-2 last year, and I think their team's better this year.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to open a window. It gets a little warm in this room sometimes.
All right. Let's move on. Linden Christian against Archbishop Murphy. Not close. Linden Christian 31-7. LC came in with a bad taste in their mouth after losing the game to Lakeside to open the year, and they took it out on a 2A team that, we thought and still could be much improved over last year. They obviously have already won a game over last year, so they are improved. How much improvement, we'll still kind of wait to see. But nevertheless, a good result for Linden Christian to get back to their roots and really run the ball well against Archbishop.
Yeah, I was really shocked by that outcome. Devin and I both chose Archbishop. Thought it would be a close game, but if even, obviously saying that Archbishop was going to win. So I didn't envision that much of a blowout of 31-7. I think it was, I want to say LC had their starters out in the fourth quarter.
Well, I mean, as the Lone Ranger here who had LC, I feel pretty good about that pick. But, when you got a quarterback and defensive product, like Jeremiah Wright, you kind of want to use him like another team that, use their quarterback in ways that he's been successful in the past. We'll get to that in just a little bit. You might know where I'm going with that. But, yeah, I mean,
Linden.
Yeah, exactly. Linden Christian, they're playing arguably the toughest schedule pound for pound in the whole state. So, by the time that they get to the Mount Baker and the Blaine and the other team, Nooksack Valley, I mean, they're going to be tested. They have played a lot of tough teams along the way. They're going to play Napavine. I'm having a hard time in my head already going with that one, who I'm going to go with, so I really think Linden Christian is right there, and I picked them to win the state championship this year. To me, their biggest obstacle still remains Nooksack Valley, and that game is going to be massive, considering only one team gets a bid, which is asinine, but it is how it is. So they're going to put a lot of emphasis on that one game. We'll see how it goes, but I think LC, got back to the way that they need to run things and how they need to go about their business, because it's a formula for success.
Yeah, definitely. And, just using their big athletes to their strengths. It's
absolutely
when you don't have a huge roster. I mean, they have more than I think a lot of 1A schools probably do. But don't necessarily have the outreach that Archbishop does, and to go down there with, I'd say, more local kids, say that, kind of with a different regard, just because Archbishop's quarterback's a transfer from Canada. So just shows, Linden in general, there's something in the water.
All right, let's move on, Tyson. This one here, I can't remember which direction you went in, but I'm pretty sure it was opposite of me. I got Montesano at Aberdeen, and Monty 38-7 over Aberdeen, a 2A team, that turned out to be, kind of a mismatch here. And Montesano really took it to them in a multitude of ways, but their quarterback Jackson Wilson, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran for 55 yards and a touchdown, and had 2 picks on defense. I mean, I know I'm jumping the gun on top athletes, but that's great. And then Mason Rasmussen with 7 catches, 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. The gentleman that we had on last week for Aberdeen, Aiden Watkins, he was held to 85 yards and still looked pretty good, according to Justin Domashowitz, who provided me the breakdown of the game. But, says overall that Aberdeen really shot themselves in the foot with turnovers and penalties. If Montesano is taking it to these higher classification teams, as they've demonstrated here in the first 2 weeks in Black Hills and Aberdeen, I think you have to put them on I'm not going to say short list, but on a rather lengthy list of teams in 1A that can compete.
Yep, totally. It's kind of like I said this preseason show week, before week 0, I guess. I think 1A is the deepest of all the classifications when it comes to like high quality football. There's 7 or 8 teams in that class that I think are all physical. They're all talented, and so far all they've all done is pretty much take it the other team that they've played out back for the most part, and take them to the woodshed, like the Enumclaw coach likes to say. So, that's an impressive win by them. I expected I picked Aberdeen, so did Devin. I expected a closer game. It's kind of like the LC Archbishop, same narrative.
Jeez, you bums.
Hey.
How did you pick better than me last week overall? Jeez, picks like that.
Because 3 out of the last 4 that we covered are 3 of the 4 that I missed.
Let's stick in 1A real quick. We'll talk a little bit more about Montesano later. La Center and Woodland, good game overall. It was 24-8. La Center getting the win in this one. Home field advantage played a little bit of a factor in this one. Woodland, they hung around, even though they didn't put up a ton of points. They were there with La Center for pretty much the entire game. I'll say this, La Center's got some tough runners. I saw a couple of touchdowns on second, third efforts running into contact and bouncing off and pushing to the goal line. La Center's one of those teams that probably got knocked off earlier than they thought that they would have last season in the playoffs, especially riding the momentum and the win that they had at Mount Baker last year. Considering Mount Baker made their way to the title game last year, right? that Center over the course of the summer was like, hey guys, we are right there. We get efforts like that, and they can take care of the football and they can play physical like they did. They are going to be a very tough team for anybody in the 1A postseason.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're prone to, like I just mentioned about the other. I mean, if you look at my top 10 for 1A, after 1 and 2, 3 through 8, it's like I've said this a couple other times this year, but you could pretty much put them in any order because they all had 7+ players that on film stood out to you. And I think mainly what will determine the outcome of the rank of those teams come into the year is just how they match up against one another. But from a quality standpoint, they're all upper echelon.
Yeah, apparently we're short on viewers right now because Jake Mo just typed into the comment section that the Bills and the Jets are tied at 16 going into overtime. What
no
a win.
way.
Yeah, what a win that would be for the Jets with Rodgers going out and then Wilson coming in and helping them beat the Bills. I think that you've got to give a lot more credit to the Jets defense than anything else.
Yeah, well, I will say after watching Hard Knocks, though, Zach Wilson looks like he's matured. Bless you. And having a guy like Rodgers mentor him, I think it's helped him a lot. I think, I don't know, it was a few weeks ago, but I said on here, someday he'll be a future Pro Bowler because I think from a mentality standpoint, he needed the influence of someone like A-Rod.
Most definitely. Let's get back to the high school ranks. I guess I don't know how to lead into this one. Linden against WF West. Linden 48, WF West 6. I can't tell you if I'm more impressed with Linden's bounce back win or if I'm more unimpressed with WF West's rebound attempt after losing the opener at home against Ridgefield. Man, this is a coin flip for me on which direction to go. I'll say this. I expected Linden to win, which is why I picked them. I didn't expect them to run and clock them, though.
No, not quite, but they did what we said they really needed to do and went back to their schematics from, years past and
run the damn ball.
Exactly. Hepner had 3 touchdowns and on the ground, and why wouldn't you run a kid that big? He's 4 yards a carry every time minimum just by falling forwards because he's so large. But WF West, Linden's got the defensive discipline to shut down a one-man crew like that, and that's probably exactly what happened without watching the game.
Well, I'm not to put you on the spot, right? We can put each other on the spot here and bounce this idea off of each other, I suppose. But I'm not surprised Linden won, right? But aren't you surprised that WF West, after playing them the season last year when they were, fairly well off with talent, and after Linden losing their home opener, I'm a little shocked that WF West kind of whimpered in this one here. I'm not surprised that Linden bounces back. That's not a surprise to me. But it's more of a shock to me that WF West didn't put up much of a fight at all.
I think they're a team that's got to be struggling for an offensive identity. I don't think Brumfield had ever played quarterback, and unless he's got a complement in the backfield that's a threat, or someone that's as big of a threat as he was as at wide receiver, it really is just a shut down the reads and approach for Linden that they play so sound in their trenches and with their linebacker play that they're probably one of the toughest matchups for a team that's built like WF West is right now.
Well, I just expected WF West to come a little bit stronger in this game overall, and I don't know how much trouble that they're really in when it comes to league play, but there's got to be some teams that are,
I would say they're in trouble
to play them.
Yeah, I would say they're in trouble. I mean, that league is clearly Tom Waters. Yeah.
As of right now, I've got no problem just chalking the trophy up to the T-Birds here, and I mean it's a good opening for potentially Black Hills to get in there, and maybe even an Aberdeen. So.
Yeah, Tumwater looks much the best. It's really hot in this room. We only have the one AC unit, and so
did you say 1A? Did you say 1A?
One AC.
Oh,
unit.
gosh. Because I thought that was a smooth transition to the next 1A game that I had. It's a crossover game, but it had Royal and Othello. And I didn't learn anything from this game because Royal was my pick to win. I mean, they just continue to be the machine that they are, 42-7. You know, we talk about 1A, Tyson, about how much depth it really has. But the same thing, the same question that I would, I guess, counter that with is it really? I mean, when you got Royal at the top doing what they've done for the past 2+ seasons, 3 seasons, I mean, we could talk. The Jets won. Nicole Bartroff just typed in, "Oh my God." We could talk all day about depth in 1A and how sexy it looks that there are a bunch of competitive teams 1 through 8. But at the end of the day, if the team at the top isn't losing, what are you going to do?
Yeah, totally.
Ronan Rasmussen says Jets win on a punt return. Holy shit.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, but anyway, back to Royal and Othello. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess we're gonna learn a little bit more about them beyond this game here. But for a 2A team playing the 1A state champions, I mean, it's not like it's totally unexpected. I mean, you can't kill them for losing to them the way that they did. I mean, like I said, Royal's just an offensive juggernaut, and their defense is solid as well. So,
yeah, it's a system for sure, but
Wiley.
I don't know. Yep, a Wiley system, definitely.
Exactly. Let's go to another absolute. Oh, go ahead.
I was just say they got the other quarterback seeing all red. If we want to keep playing on his name.
Yeah, I mean Royal at LC. I mean that's the only game that I'm really looking at on their schedule, and I'm like, yeah, I could see it maybe going LC's way. You know, we'll get to that later on down the road. Yeah. Another absolute blowout. Napavine at Onalaska, 58-14. Yeah, chalk that one up to the I'm not shocked category.
It was close early. I think it was 16-8 in the second quarter. And, you know, Napavine just grabbed the reins and gave Onalaska the spurs and took them where they wanted to after that.
I'm telling you right now, throughout the year, I'm not picking against Napavine at all. So we probably shouldn't even have them as a game. Although I will say that if I can't remember if they do for sure or not, but if they do play Kalama this year, I will give some thought to that game because I do think Kalama will have a hardened enough schedule to possibly compete with them. Other than the Napavine LC game, I take it back. That game, I will think about it a lot. So we can bring him back. We can bring him back.
Yeah, that's on September 30th. They're both Saturday games, and the Kalama game's October 14th. But the matchup I want to see after the last couple of years is Napavine and Royal.
Sure.
I mean, two total machines as far as, you know, I mean, obviously Napavine didn't lose last year. Royal had that slip up to LC, but
who's the last team to beat Napavine off the top of your head? Go.
Probably Kalama in the state title game in 21.
Jackson Esri. Yep, you got it. Yep. Big winner.
Yep. So there you go. 2-point game too.
All right, this next game, if Ronan, if you're still on here watching, you got to type in how it was or you know what your team feels after the game. But I'm telling you what, I don't say I went out on a limb, but I also said last week, Tyson, that I'm not betting against Highline probably the rest of the season. And that included picking them to win against Kennedy Catholic last week. And they almost did it at the end, but they dug themselves a really big hole early in the game. Kennedy Catholic kind of had everything going there, but Highline, you know, they took the second string, you know, move to disrespect and really reeled off, I think, 22 straight points in a very small amount of time to make Kennedy Catholic sweat it out. And then they came up with a defensive stop that was going to allow them to get the ball back on a punt return, but there was an injured player, and with no timeouts left, there was a 40-second runoff, and that ended the ball game. So we really don't know, I guess, what that last possession could have potentially brought for a good ending. But I do know this, Coach Coop's guys don't quit. And Kennedy Catholic is still one of those teams that is talented, and will probably compete in 4A. I would not look at this like they barely beat a 2A Highline. Those days are over. I'm telling you right now, this Highline team looks gutsy, and I still wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. It's toughest non-league schedule probably of any 2A school, I would say. Well, say that with a asterisk, just because we learned a little bit more about the state of Rainier Beach right now.
I think I still think Tumwater's got a pretty tough schedule overall with North Kitsap and then playing Kelso at home this next week. I mean, they're not like they're not dog crap in terms of what they're scheduling. But I'm with you though on highlights.
No. They're circling it in the preseason though. It was like, we thought Rainier Beach might be a little bit more competitive than they've been thus far, and then we knew Kennedy Catholic would be pretty good, but and they are only losing by 3 to that, I think 5A school in Colorado. That's a perennial playoff team. So yeah, shows a lot of heart by Highline to play that game the way they did, and really it's just going to give them. Say that league is theirs. From here on out, they can just kind of iron out the kinks and, not to look past any one week or one game or anything. But I'd say they got their hardest matchups until playoff time off the schedule already.
Right. Well, they're not gonna take the games with that mentality, in my opinion. I think they're gonna.
That's an armchair point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to try to. You're never gonna. That's the thing. It's rare or never will you play a perfect game. So they'll have things that they want to work on the whole season. But definitely a gut check test the first 2 weeks to play teams that are bigger than they are, with a richer history than they are, and to either blow them out or take it down to the last minute of the game with a runner-up and the state title game that's 2 classifications higher than them. So. On the road too. So, that's I look at their schedule from here on out. Sammamish could be an interesting matchup. They have, I think, the leading rusher in the 2A classification on that team. And his name's Ty. What is his name? Ty Webster. Good running back. So they'll have a couple games that will be tests for sure, but. Given how deep and well-rounded a team they look to be thus far, I expect them to take care of business for sure.
Well, let's stick to the theme of taking care of business. Ilwaco took care of a lot of business against Toutle Lake, and I got to be honest with you. This is a tough team to figure out here, Tyson. They beat Toutle Lake 49-0, and in the week before, Toutle Lake went on the road and took out Morton White Pass. So, I guess what I'm getting at here is like, how good is Ilwaco going to be when it comes to the 2B fray? Are they going to be a team that's, top 10 worthy? Which, by the way, we will reveal the top 10 rankings in just a little bit. I think that Ilwaco has a lot of potential here, and I want one more week, Tyson. I want one more week to reserve my right to evaluate Ilwaco in terms of a long-term expectation.
For sure.
Their week 1 opponent, North Beach, I expected a drubbing like we got. The Toutle Lake game, I did pick Ilwaco, but I also thought Toutle Lake coming in off of a win against a tougher team, and historically, and Morton White Pass, the combo team, and they went on the road and they handled their business. So I was like pretty impressed with Toutle Lake in week number 1. So this week coming up for Ilwaco, they're going to go to Raymond South Bend. And there's another one of those, hybrid teams that's, had a pretty good history. So I want one more week to judge Ilwaco, but I'm super impressed by what I see on film. They are really smash mouth, old school, a lot of I formations and a lot of split tight ends. And they're going to run a little bit of misdirection at you. So, they're going to go right downhill and try to beat you with their.
Yeah, just their point differential alone is, I don't think there's another one in the that classification that you can say that about. Not even Well, Napavine's sitting there with a darn near 90-plus point differential, just like they are.
I wonder why.
Yeah, Okanagan's up there too, but well, I guess probably the top 3 schools overall are, because Lynn Ritzville's hung some points on people too. But either way, to go beat a team and put up 40 plus and give up nothing, that's just pure dominance. Because a lot of times when you are up 40, a team might score that third quarter or fourth quarter touchdown just as you're kind of making it a little bit more vanilla. But it just shows how dominant they have been the first 2 weeks. So I'm excited to see what they could or could not be. Like I really don't know what to think of them yet totally either. But yeah, those are obviously about as flawless games as you could play. 47-zip, 49-zip.
Well, they got a tough running back that totes the ball, who runs to contact and likes to do the little shove off stiff arms and stuff and slow up, So we'll see how that strategy works against a stiffer defense coming up this week in Raymond, South Bend. But just a couple more to recap here, and then we're ready to move on. We don't really know, at least me, I don't really know a lot about the team that Ridgeline has this year. I know that Ridgeline last year was not very good, but Mount Spokane, they had a pretty good run last season. 28-20, Mount Spokane does end up getting the win here, but Ridgeline kept this one close and was a thorn in Mount Spokane's side the entire time. What kind of insight would you have on that game, if any?
Mount Spokane was playing quarterback 3. Haberman, who is a stud, didn't get to play. Got a 1-game suspension for something that people around the game week 1 said was pretty ticky-tack. So I don't know what was wrong with quarterback 2, but really it was the Bodie Gardner show for Mount Spokane. He had 2 special teams touchdowns get called back, and that was it was an 8-point differential, but it very easily could have been double digits for sure, especially the kickoff return. I was watching it's a reporter from Spokane was at the game, and he posted videos, and there's 2 side judges running with the kickoff. They're probably 10 yards from where the action was going on. Neither one of them threw flags. And then you've got a guy 35 yards downfield on the other 35 from where he threw the flag. So he threw the flag like 30. It was a great throw. But I don't know what you see on a play like that from that far away that the other 2 guys don't. I watched the play over like 12 times just trying to figure out where the flag came from, because it looked like it was
the grassy knoll.
Yeah, it looked like it fell out of a player's pocket. It was just appeared out of nowhere. Then you look at the big picture and no, this guy 30 yards downfield makes the huck of his life on this flag. And so I think it was a closer game on paper than from a talent perspective it was. And obviously Mount Spokane, you got to run out quarterback 3. But Gardner still managed to have a huge game. And, he's a kid that deserves a lot more recognition for sure.
Well, thank you so much for the breakdown. I did see Gardner on Twitter, if we're still calling it Twitter, by the way. But yeah,
I do.
Very impressive. Yeah, super impressive. Good speed, good vision.
Yeah, 6'2", buck 90, track star.
Good measurables, absolutely.
Checks every box.
Yeah, I mean, we know Mount Spokane is going to be a team that's going to be real this year. I think that the game to me was more or less is Ridgeline real or not, and it sounds to me like it could have been a little bit different story had Haberman played, based on what you're saying here. But ultimately, I mean, they still scored 20 points in the ball game. So if they can hang with Mount Spokane and put up some points and be competitive, who knows what we might be able to see from them down the year against some other opponents.
Well, it's only, I think, their 3rd season. So, yeah that's
nice school. I drove past it just like about a year and a half ago. We were heading to Coeur d'Alene to get last year. Yeah, a year ago. Yeah, to get married. So it was beautiful, state of the art. It was so nice and so big. It looked like a prison from I-90. I'm looking over. I'm like, whoa. A new jail over there?
Maybe that's why they played such a disciplined football game.
I don't know, but it was a pretty nice facility. And I'm like, I know Ridge Field, Ridge Line, they got some nice facility over here too. So
Anything on the ridge is usually nice.
yes,
That
exactly.
river ridge is great too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We got two more to recap. I'm going to skip over one to save it for last. This one I wasn't shocked at really at all, but Graham Kapowsin at Puyallup, GK 42-13 over the Vikings. I don't know really what to say other than I'm not shocked at all. You know, that they're a juggernaut offensively, and holding teams to 2 touchdowns, you're going to win a lot of games.
Yep, they're probably going to score 40 every time they touch the field. That they have the weapons to do it. And Puyallup going through some churn right now, so it's, you know, when you've got probably 4 Division I targets to throw to in Super Alice, and he's probably, if you know, he gets the respect that his play renders, he's probably a D1 guy himself. So that's. Yeah, I'd like to see them go play one of those teams like they did a few years ago from Georgia or something. I think they'd have just as much of a chance of winning this game, same style they've won the first 2. That's, you know, no disrespect to Puyallup, or was it Rogers in week 1? But
yeah,
that one was pretty predictable. It's clean sweep across the board for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one question that I've got, if anything, is who's got the best defense in SPSL? Like, if you had to like really pick a team that you think is the best defensive team, which direction are you going to lean? Because it could be GK, and if they've got the best defense to go with this offense, I mean, it's gonna be super, super hard to beat them. And I mean, I like Emerald Ridge a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I really like Emerald Ridge a lot. But man, I mean, if you're going to put forth the effort that they're putting forth defensively to go along with how they're playing on the offensive side of the ball with all the weapons, I mean, what I'm saying is Graham Kapowski could afford a misdemeanor offensive game and still win.
Right?
You know, can Emerald Ridge do that? Can Curtis do that? Right? If there's an off day for Coke, you know, if he's Diet Coke that day, you know,
yeah,
who knows?
Coke Zero.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you don't want Coke Zero. You'll settle for Diet Coke.
Yeah.
But if GK's got the best defense too, man, I mean, they can overcome a sluggish offensive performance if that is the case. You know, don't know what to say. Maybe Bethel has a good defense in there too to go with it, but I don't think that they have the offensive firepower to compete with those teams. So it's really like
just lost 3-0.
Yeah, it's a balanced equation here, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I think that if you look at the boxes that GK checks, it's all of them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, talent top to bottom on that team is probably as good as it's been in the last 10 years, 15 years, and that's saying quite a bit because they've been in this position often.
And look, they pretty much boat raced that 7A school from Georgia a couple years ago in the showcase game. So I mean, they're a program that is riding high over the last couple of years. And last year they gave it one hell of a run despite losing a couple games.
Totally. No, they got better as the season went on. Really, they started their year off with a loss, but you know, picking up a kid like Durant to go with what they already have, I saw he was getting double teamed almost every play in that game last week, but you still got Jabez Woods and Chris Norris and Noah Flores. It's like you can't double team 4 guys. Otherwise, you pretty much don't have there's not enough players to go around. Unless you're going to give the quarterback the whole first quarter to throw the ball.
Well, let's move on to the last game that we picked, Tyson. And, you know, I think we were all wrong on this one. You know, Stanwood at Marysville Pilchuck, and it wasn't close, bro. Like Marysville Pilchuck just absolutely throttled them, 36-7. You know, Stanwood had been getting a lot of respect, you know, heading into this ball game, and you know, were considered to be favorites in league play, and then Marysville Pilchuck just throws a complete like wrench right into their game plan here, and I guess I just don't know what to make of Pilchuck after this. Are they really, really good, or is Stanwood not quite as good as we thought? It's early. A lot of things work like we just talked about a second ago. GK, like you mentioned, they got better as the year goes on. I don't know what to expect here in this one. Is this like Marysville's Pilchuck's best win, best performance of the season already? Or is Stanwood going to recover? I think that this is a one of those games like that WF West game against Ridgefield, right? Like, what are you going to get after this week if you're Stanwood?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think more of it, the most of it is a proponent of, there's a lot of good players last year in this state, but pound for pound from a toughness standpoint and like a mentality that he brought to a team, Canyon's older brother Ryder, it's got to be as big of a loss that anybody had. And that's saying a lot because there's a lot of good players that left this state last year, even like a kid like Johnson down at Lincoln. I would say Ryder is just as important to Stanwood as somebody like that was at Lincoln. And, any time a guy runs for 2,000 yards in a season, that doesn't happen very often. And also played both ways. He was just a freak. So his brother's talented, and they've got some other good players there. But I think that's where the slide is coming from. And, frankly, just a player that good and that physical doesn't really come along very often, especially in a town like Stanwood that notoriously, to my knowledge, has had more exclusive basketball players in the past than football.
Yeah, I mean, so it's going to be Pilchuck and then Getchell this week. And then Pilchuck, they still got to take on like Arlington and Ferndale, correct?
Yep, definitely.
So obviously we're going to find out a lot more about, I guess, the realness meter.
Glacier Peak.
Marysville Pilchuck, but that's non-league though. So, I mean,
right.
It's a test for sure. But, man, I mean, that's just one of those wins that just kind of came out of left field. I'm not going to lie. I really underestimated what Pilchuck could potentially put together going into that game. And, the one thing that I'll say about Stanwood here real quick, Tyson, is that they're very wing tee heavy. And if you're very wing tee heavy and it's not wing teeing to success, it's super hard to come back when you fall behind. So, they got to get good effort out of their defense, but they've got to be efficient as well with the football and hold on to the ball. Can't be giving it back to the opposition too often. And it's one of those games when you put on film, a lot of teams are going to be looking at that game and they're going to figure out, what the best route is to go to slow down their offensive attack. And it could be a season where Stanwood might have a couple bumps in the road, but hats off to Marysville to get that win.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to see what kind of season they set forth because they whooped Edmonds Woodway week 1 too, and then Kamiak's obviously struggled the last 2 seasons to get going, and Woodway turned around and practically shut Kamiak down 19-7, but Marysville Pilchuck hangs 40 on them the week before. It's like all of a sudden you look at that league and it's a tough one to pick. I mean, I think you could choose. Yeah, you could probably choose 4 different teams that all have an equal opportunity. I'd say Monroe's certainly Monroe. I'm clicked onto the wrong team, but you mentioned Arlington, Ferndale. Arlington's looked really good, so it'll be interesting next few weeks.
Ferndale's looked really good. They beat Linden.
Right, exactly. I mean, they're
really good.
I'd say they're the favorite at this point, but Arlington has smoked both teams they've played. So has Pilchuck. So they're going to get both
matchups.
They're going to get those games back to back too, both on the road for Pilchuck. So that'll be, we'll know a lot by October 6th.
Well, I can tell you this much: I'm going to get to know them. After a win like that against Stanwood, it's definitely eye-opening. And it makes the league a lot tougher, which makes it a lot better for potential postseason seeding. And, I'm just going to say right now, the team that benefits the most from win like that is a team like Ferndale, honestly. Because if Ferndale does end up going through their league and getting the win that they've got this coming week, they are going to look very impressive to the committee by the time the season's over. Like, they might be so impressive that they're a top 5 team.
Yeah, just like last year, really. They've scheduled tough non-conference, picked up dubs the last couple of years, and then, that obviously West Coast not considered. Well, I guess, yeah. No, they're not West Coast, are they? Getting all turned around.
Uh-oh.
On the wrong page. Yeah, they're in West Coast, 3A West Coast. For some reason, I was thinking NWC back in the day when Ferndale used to be a part of that. But
yeah.
Anyways,
just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And notoriously, that league always has at least one quality team out of it. But I'd say it's going to be a crapshoot. I bet the team that wins that league has 2, maybe 3 losses.
Yeah, I wish Mr. NWC himself was here with us right now. He told me before this, or both of us, in the week 0 preview show, that Ferndale, probably wasn't going to be that great this year. So we'll see how that ends up shaking it out. But let's stick real quick in the NWC, at least from a standpoint of other games that happened. Just some honorable mentions. Seaholm, they look like they're pretty impressive, even though they played Blaine, and that's not really like a great opponent. Nolan Wright threw for 6 touchdowns, in that game, and they got a big one coming up this week. We'll talk more about that specifically a little bit later, but I mean, Nolan Wright turning in the 6 touchdown passes, super impressive last week in that game, and they all came pretty much early in the game too.
Yeah, and the week before that, I think he had 100 yards rushing. He's a good quarterback. I got to watch him live last year, just as a freshman, and kind of slight in stature, but he's got a good arm and he's fast, so he flushes the pocket. It's hard for even the fastest guys on the other team to catch up to him, and he's able to make plays on the run, especially having probably one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in NWC at the moment, Watson, from a production standpoint. So yeah, I expected that kind of a score in that game. It wasn't surprising by any means, but they clearly have shown that they're not just, because they ran a lot of wing T last year and then would branch off into the shotgun, maybe 1 out of every 8 plays or so. But it looks like they've spread it out a bit more this year, running more shotgun.
I just circled back. I like that term, by the way, circled back. I just circled back to the Cashmere Deer Park game. I forgot, left that off. We picked that game last week, but Fear the Deer ended up falling 35-15 to Cashmere, and you've got cash money in the top 3 this week in the 1A. Did you happen to get some good insight on that game as all last week?
I didn't. I had them 3 last week, and I think it's funny because I thought one of you was going to pick Deer Park from the way we were talking about it, and I think I said, Cashmere's going to beat them 49-14.
Pretty close.
They didn't put up 49, but it was still comfortable enough. 3 scores. So
yeah, there were some other good wins around the state last week, and one honorable mention that I had written down was Ording thrashing Washington 48-6. I mean, the Ording Cardinals, and they look as real can be in the SPSL 2A.
Definitely. They look like they could give Enumclaw a run. 5, pretty good team, doubled them up the week before. Washington's a team I thought, looking at them on film, just before the year, I was like, they got a lot of size and they got some good players. They've had a really disappointing start so far, but yeah, Ording looks like how they did probably 5 years ago. They had a pretty good football team back then, and really, it's an area I would think should turn out good talent. I like those country teams.
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're 2 years removed from being in the playoffs in the round of 16. They had to take on Ridgefield, and Ridgefield that year only allowed, I think, 6 points per game during the entire season up to that point, and Ording actually led 14-13 at halftime at Ridgefield in that game before being shut out themselves in the second half. But they had a real clunker last season. So I mean, they had a lot of seniors on that team that left. So it's not surprising to me that they've rebounded to this degree. Washington, they were, I think, 0-3, I want to say, last year, Tyson, in the first 3 games of the year before they reeled off like 8 straight or something like that to get to the postseason. We'll see if they have an opportunity to right the ship. But, man, it looks like a completely different team in Washington this year and a completely different team in Ording as well.
Yeah, it was a 41-34 game last year with Washington getting the win. A little bit later in the year, it looked like it was game 6 of the year last year. So caught Washington as they were starting to, heat up. But yeah, I mean, and Fife was a good, solid team last year, playoff football team. And to pretty much beat them soundly and then go beat another in-league opponent. Yeah, I'd say, well, Ording's on my radar. You'll see that for sure.
Yeah. Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to go rankings or do you want to go athletes?
We can discuss the rankings.
All right. You want to start at the bottom or start at the top?
Let's start at the bottom. We haven't talked much 2B yet.
All right, let's do that. Let me get that up here for us.
Besides a few of the games that were on our list, but
so there they are on the bottom of your screen, ladies and gentlemen. The 2B rankings according to Recruit Radar PNW, Tyson McCallum. And at number 1, big shocker here, Tyson. You got Napavine at number 1. And then at number 2, Okanagan. Number 3, Lind Ritzville Sprague. Number 4, the Toledo Riverhawks. Number 5, Northwest Christian of Colbert. Number 6, Riverview of Kennewick. Number 7, Raymond South Bend. Number 8, PL Willapa Valley. Number 9, the Ilwaco Fishermen debut. And number 10, it's Kalama. The Chinooks rounding out the top 10. A lot of fair play here, Tyson. You got almost 50-50 on your east of the mountains, west of the mountains teams, but as of right now, 60% for the west and 40% for the east. And I don't going to get an ounce of argument for me on Napavine and Okanagan being number 1 and number 2. After that, it starts to get a little bit more convoluted, but I think that Lynn Ritzville and Toledo are very deserving of where they are at. And I got no problem with where NWC and Riverview is at the moment. It'll all shake itself out here coming up this week. Ultimately, what were you thinking going into these rankings?
Yeah, Napavine, obviously, until someone can beat them, they're kind of like Royal. They just that's their spot. Okanagan, same deal. There's really nobody else as dominant as them, although I starting to have my doubts whether or not Lynn Ritzville is, the way they've been running the ball against people. Toledo's won their first 2 games soundly. NWC beat a team in Reardon pretty soundly last week, and Reardon beat Lake Roosevelt the week before, who was pretty solid this year, and I had inside my preseason top 10. Riverview has done what they should the last 2 games, and now those 2 teams get to play each other this week, so that's going to tell us a lot about 5 and 6. Raymond South Bend losing to Toledo was their 1 loss, and then last week they hang 60-plus points on a team and run the ball for 400 yards, just like Lynn Ritzville did. I moved PL Willapa Valley down. They were probably my biggest change other than introducing Ilwaco and Kalama, mainly just because PL Willapa Valley hasn't won a game beat Mossy Rock 26-8. That's a comfortable win, but I don't think Mossy Rock's maybe as good of a program as some of the teams I just mentioned. That
they're 1B, right? Aren't they? Don't they play the 8?
Actually, yeah, they might be 1B. So you could be right about that. 1B is not my forte, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's 8 man.
So That's something this might be a rookie question, but I've been trying to figure that part out. When a 1B school plays a 2B school, how many guys are on the field?
11. They
Is
play.
there?
They play in 11.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I thought, but I wasn't sure. But yeah, they are 1B. So, 26-8, that's not a big win over a school that doesn't even play the same style of football. And then they did beat Adna 22-20, but then let's look up the rankings, and Napavine beat Adna 59-6. So I thought they needed to be moved down
Close
below.
game.
Yeah, right. I thought they needed to be moved down below Riverview, Northwest Christian, and Raymond South Bend. But considering they still had a pretty good year last year, um, and returned quite a few of their players, they seemed worthy of keeping in that top 10. But because they haven't lost, but I still think their quality of wins aren't that of what, say, even Raymond South Bend's 1 win and their 7-point loss to Toledo was.
Yeah, I mean, Owaka really thrashed Toutle Lake last week, and they haven't allowed a point the entire season. I can see why that they're creeping up your rankings. They're getting massively disrespected on like Max Preps. I think Max Preps has got them like 33 or something like that. And there's only like 45 teams in 2B. So, it's kind of disrespectful to have a team that's 2-0, 12 spots from the lowest ranking in the class. I just don't agree with that. Kalama at 10, got no problem with that, my man. I mean, they just won against Castle Rock, a 1A opponent. Although Castle Rock is down their star player and returning Trico League MVP Steven Ibsen to a broken foot. So, I'm not gonna damper Kalama's win. Beating a higher classification team is beating a higher classification team. It doesn't matter how you do it; you win the game. Having played Woodland in week 1, they play La Center coming up this week, so kind of running the gambit here in the fringe area of Cowlitz County and Clark County. I mean, La Center and Kalama is playing about as tough as a schedule as it gets in this designated area down here. So I got no problem with them being at number 10 at 1-1.
Yeah, I think from a talent standpoint, they might be even better than that. But they had a rough year last year. They got to be a few games above 500 before I think it's that you definitely insert them higher than they are. But it was hard to say that one of these other teams was more deserving of the 10 spot than them. I got my eye on Manson, and Reardon still not a bad team. They got cleaned up pretty good by Northwest Christian. Friday Harbor I had at 10 last week after their week 1 win against South Woodby. And then they fall by 21 to Granite Falls. But again, playing up, I think Granite Falls is a pretty good team. So I could see them there at 10 too. But other than that, I had a hard time really slotting anybody else in there above them for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, I like number 3 and number 4 here. You got Lynn Ritzville Sprague with the Broness show, and then you got Toledo. If you haven't heard of him yet, they got a good running back in Ethan Carver. So, 2 teams that are very running back, I won't say dependent, but at least heavy in how they're going to go about their business. And I think both those teams are rightfully deserving of 3 and 4. But we've talked about it over the last year plus 2 years almost now. It's, Napavine and Okanagan are the teams that seem to be destined to one another. Question remains, though, will there be a team that can spoil that party and get back into, say, a state championship setting against one of Napavine or one of Okanagan, or maybe both get knocked off? I don't know. I don't see it happening, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. Injuries still play a big factor in football. So, health usually determines how far you're going to go.
Yeah, I think, like I said, Lynn Ritzville might be up there with those teams as far as I'm concerned. I think they've run for almost 800 yards in 2 weeks. So they got, not only do they have bonus, but Brock Kinch, senior running back, I think he himself has nearly 400 yards in 2 games as well. So they've got a 2-headed monster. And both those kids are, they're not especially for being a 2B school, they're not little running backs. Like Bonus is all of 5'10", 205, rep 225 19 times in his summer between being a sophomore and a junior, which I think I said this maybe last week, but that was more reps than like Antonio Gibson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, guys that had been drafted, say the year prior at the combine. And then Kinch is all of 5'9", 192. So they're little bowling balls that, you can't just stack the box and stop them. You got to wrap up and gang tackle.
Nicely done on the 2B rankings. Northwest Christian and Riverview. Remember that, folks. That's 5 and 6 on Tyson's list here. Those two teams got a date this week. So
we got Ilwaco and Raymond South Bend as well.
Yeah, well, exactly. So we'll have a couple shakeups coming in next week for 2B rankings. Let's take a gander at the 1A rankings. So we got Royal at 1, Nooksack Valley at 2, Kashmir at 3, Lakeside 9 Mile Falls at 4, Kings at 5, Montesano 6, La Center at 7, Linden Christian at 8, Godzilla at 9, and Colville at 10, rounding out the top 10 in the 1A classification. No shock at all that Royal still holds the top spot in your rankings. Also, no shock to me, Nooksack Valley holds the number 2 spot. Let's start right there. How far apart do you realistically think Royal and Nooksack Valley are from one another?
Not at all. I could put them either way. I think, that'd be a great football game. That's all I can really say. I want to say I think Nooksack actually probably is a little bit stronger and bigger inside on the trenches. And I said, what was it last week? I said we should call Colton Lentz the 1A Braden Platt because, that's a tall comparison just because Braden Platt's a once-in-a-decade type player that comes along. But from what he does for his team standpoint, Lentz is basically the exact same guy. Give him the ball anywhere from 10 to 30 times, whatever it takes. He's going to score multiple touchdowns on defense at linebacker. He's going to be the anchor of your defense, and he's a big kid too. He's not as big as Braden, but he's also 2 years a year younger than Braden, and he's probably all of 6'2", 210, 215, maybe 220. And that's just naming one person off Nooksack. Royal's got a similar version. I think his name's Jared Lee, I think is his name. Another kid that's big and physical, kind of like that. Oh boy, it's the kid's name that was there 2 years ago. Avery Ellis, I think was his name. That might be his little brother that's currently on the team, but went to Utah State. Another kid that was 6'2", 200 plus, physical, but that's like the top guy you discuss, and then you look at the rest of their roster, and they've got 7-8. Both have 7 or 8 other guys. I'm just not sure that Royal has an Ackerman and a Stremler or a Haliapapi on their roster. So in the trenches, I think Nooksack takes the edge, but pretty much everywhere else, you could probably say they're pretty comparable teams.
Well, 1 and 2, obviously, I think are a little bit better than the rest of the teams in the rankings, although not too far apart. We'll find out a lot more between Nooksack and Kings coming up this week. We'll talk a little bit more about that game, but you got Kings at 5, and sandwiched in between those two teams is Kashmir and Lakeside 9 Mile Falls. Obviously, Lakeside, having beaten Linden Christian by a touchdown at home, they're very well deserving of being in that 4 spot there. Moving just a little bit further down than that, Monty against La Center, hypothetically. We got Monty ranked slightly above them. And, I think at this point, Monty probably should be the team that's favored in that matchup. Although, if it hypothetically were to happen, I think that La Center is a very physical team. And I'm not going to say – I hate doing the who beat who, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, so far through the season, that's kind of all we have to really go off of is who's played who would beat who, and crossover matchups type thing. And I mean, I think Center beating Woodland, a team that I think Woodland would beat Black Hills. I think Woodland would beat Aberdeen in a matchup. So I don't know. I think they're very even, but I think Center might actually be slightly more deserving to be above them because they played two A teams as well. Tyson, they played Woodland, they played Hawkinson, they beat Hawkinson 43-6, a team that won a state championship 5 years ago. Obviously it's not 5 years ago Hawkinson, but I mean they're beating teams that are good. They're going to play Kalama this week. It's a tough match to call between Monty and Center head to head. I don't know how that one would go.
Yeah, I agree. And from what you can find film wise, but if you ask me before the season, I would say Center is a better team for sure. But then you look at what Monty's done with their 2 games, and there's nothing you can say to poke holes in it at all. So it's as good a wins as you could ask for to start and how to start the year. So I think just the way they've won those games has been more impressive than the Center, but I'd be interested to see that matchup too. You can probably put those 2 teams either way, and I think they're probably the most alike when it comes to strength of schedule and the way that they are built per se overall. But yeah, probably see that one come playoff time.
I think Montesano moves the ball a little bit better through the air than Center does, but yeah. I think Center will try to wear you down a lot more with physical running play to counter that, and that would be like a ball control type game. What weather are we getting in that game? If weather plays a factor in it, I think that might slightly favor Center more than Monty, but these are all hypotheticals at this point. There's really nothing solid to go off of, other than the fact that they've both played 2 teams that are in higher classification, and they both had great success in wins. But is it crazy to say that I think Linden Christian is actually better than both of them?
No, it just depends on how consistent. From a talent standpoint, they probably are, but their biggest problem the last 2 years being consistent. Sure. Overall, definitely. They've played high for the highest games, and then they've had, some games that have been overall letdowns. I mean, just even as hot as they were, losing to Mount Baker in that little Kansas City tiebreaker, that was a letdown because you looked at that game on paper, and Linden Christian was the superior team from a talent standpoint. I mean, granted, he wasn't on the field, but even without Kate Eldridge, they've still got plenty of at least 2 guys that are for sure D1 players on that team. And so, I think talent-wise, they might be better than Royal, but they don't have the same program and track record that Royal does. But frankly, these rankings stayed the exact same with the exception of the 10 spot. I moved out Toppenish because as good as they were last year, they deserve to start the year in the top 10, but they just haven't proved that they need to stay there. Really, we talked about this earlier. I moved Colville in because they came out and they whooped Tenino by 20, and then they turn around last week and beat North Central by 2 scores. You look at the number 9 Zilla team, and they just beat Tenino by 2. I could easily put Colville at 9, but considering what I had last week, I was like, none of these teams technically deserve to go down. And Colville is just making its debut in the top 10, so we got to see it keep rolling the way it has been to have anything really change so far. But there's some matchups this week, like you mentioned before, Kings and Nooksack. That could have a big ability to change a few things for sure.
Anything else 1A that you want to talk about?
No, I feel, like I said, I feel solid about 1 through 8 as far as these 8 teams will be here all year.
I definitely agree with that. They're all solid. I think you could mix and match a couple of them. Honestly, I really think that LC's got a top 5 talented team, and maybe like you said, I mean, maybe there is a little bit of inconsistency. I'm not going to lie, but a lot of that had to do with Eldridge going out last year, and even you would acknowledge that as well. That's a kind of a game changer of a loss. But we don't really talk too much about last year. Focusing on just this year alone, I mean, Lakeside did everything that it needed to do to win that game, and I think that you have to keep them above Linden Christian, but I got no problem with LC being behind Monty and behind La Center in the standings in terms of like, you know, those two are undefeated. Those two beat 2 higher classification teams. But if they all played out on the field, I would probably be betting my money on Linden Christian to win head-to-head matchups against both of them. That'd be the only thing that I would say. But I like where your heart's at. I like where you're thinking, and I like all the reasons on how you're justifying where you got everybody, and I think it's actually correct in terms of where they are ranked.
Yeah, the one you could probably poke the holes in the most is probably Kashmir, just because their wins aren't like, you know, they haven't beat like Lakeside beat a better team than Kashmir has so far this year. But from a film standpoint, preseason wise, I felt I had Kashmir too low to start the year. I thought they were just right based off of kind of how their results went last year. And then I looked at their roster further and I was like, they remind me the most of Nooksack as far as like physicality, top to bottom goes. And so that's why I have them at 3. But, you know, a team like Kings, who has the pedigree that they have and has been as consistent as they have, they could easily be at 3. Obviously, Lakeside's win over LC is probably better than any other win of any team on here so far. So besides, I'd say that's probably the most impressive win. But overall, I think Kashmir is a deeper team than Lakeside, and that's where, for me, that decision was based strictly off of the talent that I see in the film room.
Yeah, I got no problems with it so far. I think that, yeah. Although, I mean, we'll work it all out. You know, it's going to end up working itself out. The Kings and Nooksack game is going to be pretty big this week, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that later on. Let's move to 2A. So the 2A rankings: Enumclaw number 1, Tumwater number 2, Highline number 3, Linden number 4, Washougal 5, Anacortes 6, North Kitsap 7, Cedro 8, Seaholm 9. And look who it is, the Orting Cardinals at number 10. You like them so much, they're in the top 10 this week, taking Ridgefield's spot from a week ago. Enumclaw remains at number 1 here, but Tumwater ends up jumping all the way up to number 2 after their win at North Kitsap. He still got North Kitsap in there at number 7, above Cedro Woolley and above Seaholm. So just walk us through what you're thinking here for 2A.
Well, let me get mine open compared to last week. Enumclaw, they're a team that is, I mean, they might have scored more points in games last year, but they are going to be in every single game because they are just tough through and through. In their case, I don't need to see them blow somebody out to put them there because I know they have a deep team and they're plenty physical. I would say they have, you know, the most to build off of last year, being undefeated, getting snubbed with a 3 seed behind North Kitsap, who did have a loss last year. And frankly, their schedules were pretty similar. So I thought they got snubbed in that. Granted, Linden showed why they were a higher seed and ultimately the better team when they did get to play. But I love their senior leadership at quarterback. I love the, you know, kind of passion they have in their program. I love their style of play. You mentioned I formation stuff earlier. You don't see a lot of teams do that anymore. And they frankly have like an old Mike Holmgren style offense where they're going to line up an I form and come at you downhill, mean run blocking and run a lot of play action stuff, corners of the end zones, and got a big 6'4" quarterback, you know. but I'm just a big fan of the culture they've built there. And then we go down to Tumwater at 2. So last week I had Tumwater at 3. And frankly, with their win over North Kitsap, who I had at number 4, I just thought, 20-point win against a ranked team that was in a runner-up to Linden and played them tough last year. Like I said, mentioned earlier in the show, Tumwater's about as complete of a team as you get. Highline goes from 2 to 3. I think it's more of a product of, I just think Tumwater is that good. And it's not like Highline did anything wrong last week in that loss to Kennedy Catholic. I expected them to lose, picked them to lose, but still think, especially with the courage they've had in scheduling their games and the results that they've had in those games, they're deserving of being in that position. Linden goes to 4 from number 5 last week, so pounded WF West, showed us that they will still play the style of football that we talked about that didn't seem to happen in week 1 against Ferndale. Washougal goes from 6 to 5, basically just North Kitsap bumping down from 4 to 7. It allowed Washougal to move and Anacortes both to move up a spot. Both teams did kind of what I figured they would in their games. Washougal 37-8 over Top Mission, Anacortes 41-7 over Port Angeles. So I think, from a dimensional standpoint, North Kitsap is probably the most one-dimensional team of those top 7 that we just named. Obviously, Enum Claw hasn't put up the big points to wow you, but like I mentioned, they have a good quarterback, good running game. They just want to control the ball and beat you up. They don't care how many points they score. Cedro at 8 remains to be seen how truly good I think Cedro is this year. They were good last year, beat that Tumwater team in the playoffs. But
in their own building.
Yeah, but Tumwater added a new element to their team, being able to throw the ball better this year. Reynolds has thrown the ball a lot better this year and more than he did last year. But I still think, he got nicked up late in the year last year, playing 2 ways like he does, running it and throwing it as much as he does, and frankly being the leading tackler every week. They're a team that, in that regard, I think they're kind of one-dimensional. And then Seahome, bring them into that's no slight to Cedro. They play outstanding defense, and they're a tough football team, but they just have a very dominant player that really is the best player on the field, no matter what part of the game is going on. Seahome they happen to play Cedro Woolley this week. Put them at number 9 because they've won their first 2 games comfortable, and they were a tough team last year. Tough out for any of the NWC schools. And I think if I hadn't, Devin probably would have had my head, or both you guys. I heard the last few weeks they should be in there, and Coach Cooper picked them to win the state, or not win it, but a team he would look out for. And then Ording, you can't really say much about their first 2 games other than, wow, we mentioned it earlier. Ridgefield gets knocked out because I think that win against WF West wasn't as impressive as it looked like originally after seeing them go up against Linden. So there's a few other teams out there that are, making some noise that I have my eyes on. Bainbridge is one handy in their first 2 weeks. Clover Park's another one that has. East Valley of Yakima, Hudson's Bay, Olympic. All of those teams have looked good in the first 2 weeks, but I've been most impressed with Ording's wins, and that's why they slide in at number 10, sitting at 2-0.
I think that ultimately Enum Claw isn't quite as impressive in the first 2 weeks as I expected that they would be. I think that I thought their margin of victory would be a little bit more, even against Peninsula. And then having Peninsula lose last week to Kentwood, I'm not fully convinced that Enum Claw is the number 1 team in 2A. They did have a 12-1 season last year, and they did earn, I think, a lot of good preseason consideration to be ranked very high coming into this year. I just don't know how this year's team ultimately is comparing to last year's, and I think that the talent is a lot better in certain teams in 2A this year than it was last year. I think Tumwater's much improved. I think Washougal's much improved. I think Highline's much improved. And even though Linden lost to Ferndale, I still think that Linden is very, very good. Seaholm is much improved. Cedro returned a lot of guys. All I'm saying is I think that you could probably make the case that Tumwater winning by 20 on the road against North Kitsap, a team that only lost by a touchdown in the state championship game last year. Again, hard to compare last year to this year. I would probably have Tumwater number 1 overall, personally. Then I'd probably, honestly, I mean, I know that this is kind of asinine, maybe to some. I probably would still have Highline at 2 over Enumclaw, even though Enumclaw has won both of their games. I think the Highline is very deserving of being considered a top 2 team still, having lost to Kennedy Catholic by 7. I don't think that that's a bad loss as well. Just to piggyback off of what you said, I did have some reservations picking them. I did think that Kennedy Catholic should win the game, but it's like I don't want to doubt, the team and the mentality and the effort that Highline has been putting forth so far this season. Enumclaw to me is more like that third team. I would say Linden in that third team range as well. I mean, they're pretty close to one another. Washougal over Anacortes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that game stylistically works out, honestly. I think that if Anacortes does what they did last year and run the ball a lot more, I think that they would for sure be a higher ranked team than Washougal. But the Anacortes that's played so far this year, the 2 games, I think Washougal has been more impressive than they have in their 2 games. So how it would play out on the field, I think it would just be totally dependent on what style of game that it is. If Anacortes, like I said, does what they did last season, I think that they win that game. But if they play how they have the first 2 games in that matchup, I think Washougal beats them, personally.
The one thing I'll say about that is Anacortes' strength this year is for sure their defense at this point.
Sure.
And that's what would make that game a really interesting matchup, because it would come down to essentially B versus that Anacortes. I guess it's a pretty complete package from the defensive side of the ball. But their linebacker play and secondary has been pretty lights out this year. So, but if it wasn't a defensive game, that's where I see Washougal having the edge just at this point. B's probably the best quarterback in 2A. So,
him or Ronan, maybe. I think Ronan and even Nolan. I mean, if Seaholm's going somewhere, it's going to be because of Nolan Wright. So,
sure. No, I think it's just B having a little bit more experience. Obviously, he's a senior.
Sure.
Committed to Idaho. His buddy Evers probably will be too. I would imagine it's going to be there somewhere, like in the Big Sky.
Is it crazy that I would put? Sorry, to cut you off. I didn't mean that. Is it crazy though that I would put North Kitsap below both Cedro and Seaholm? Personally, I the winner of that game obviously it should leapfrog North Kitsap next week. A 20-point home loss to a team that Cedro beat last year in the playoffs. I think that I think Cedro might deserve a little bit more love. Seaholm still has a little bit to prove in my mind, but I mean they didn't take it on the chin quite yet like North Kitsap just did.
No, that hinders for me more on what I saw last year and how Anacortes, Cedro, and Seaholm are all pretty similar teams to how they were last year.
Sure.
Obviously North Kitsap made Anacortes turn the ball over 5 or 6 times in that game in the playoffs, and Anacortes frankly whooped Cedro Woolley last year. It wasn't really they pretty much got boat raced until Cedro scored some late points. And Seaholm actually handled Anacortes for at least the first half of that game last year, but certainly nobody shut Anacortes down to 7 points like North Kitsap did. And so when I consider that all of those teams I just mentioned in the NWC plus North Kitsap returned a lot of their players last year, I still think that they probably have the edge. I think it's more of a testament. That's how much better Tumwater is.
That's what I was just about to ask. You think Tumwater is just that much better last year than this season?
This year than last year, yeah, for sure. And most of that comes down to the ability of their quarterback.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I got no problem with, the justification that I get from how you see things. Just as an objective contrarian,
No, totally. I mean, I get where you're coming from on that too. And that's where the whole phrase of last year isn't this year, I'm kind of asterisking it with that opinion. But that's just from what I saw last. I mean, no team, not even Linden, gave Anacortes that kind of trouble. Granted, they didn't do it to Tumwater, but I think Tumwater is like loaded this year. So we'll see. But North Kitsap they didn't win their first game that comfortable either. It was only a 3-point win over Mount Tahoma. So maybe they are in a down year. It's just I want to give it a couple more weeks before I'm sure of that.
No, totally. Just like I wanted to, I asked for another week on Owako. So I mean, right. I'm okay with that. I'll say this though, Tyson. I'm pretty confident here that whoever the two teams are that end up coming out of Northwest, I think that they're pretty safe in terms of getting to the round of 8. Maybe even getting to the semis. And then I'm looking at 3 teams realistically. Like I mean, I'm not trying to exclude North Kitsap here, but I'm looking at Washougal, I'm looking at Tumwater, and I'm looking at Highline. Those 3 teams plus the 2 that come out of NWC, like I feel pretty confident that those teams are going to be in the semis. Like any combination. There obviously one will have to beat another. We'll find out who that has to be, but I don't see a ton of depth in 2A in terms of, if you're looking at the state playoffs and you've got teams 8 through 16, I mean, maybe there's a Prosser, right, that comes in here. I'll say this. Here's a team that's not getting talked about at all right, but they're high on the Evans computer rankings, and that's Grandview. So I don't know what to really make of Grandview, obviously, but they're going to work it out in the CWAC. But I just don't see it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Stolockham could be better than we think. They got to play Enumclaw this week, so that'll.
Ording could be that team, right? Ording could be that team.
Yeah, for sure. Even Lakewood. I mean, granted, Stanwood's loss was embarrassing last week, but the first week Lakewood had Stanwood on the ropes there for half of the game, and then Stanwood pulled away like really they should have. But I mentioned a few others that have scored big points and had decent wins, like a Bainbridge. I don't really know what they're about or what.
Maybe Olympic, right?
Maybe Olympic.
Yeah.
Hudson's Bay has had 2 really comfortable wins, but they're probably not the best team in their own league. So,
they're probably
Prosser probably has the most pedigree and most fortitude, I would say, when you talk about who's not in there.
I think Hudson's Bay is kind of like in that 4 spot range in the Greater St. Helens League is like the best case scenario. Washougal is going to win the league. Woodland's probably going to finish 2nd. Ridgefield's probably going to finish 3rd. I probably would have Hudson's Bay in that 4th place spot, maybe. I mean, there will be a lot depending on that game between those 2 teams, but I'm pretty sure it'll be Ridgefield's homecoming against Hudson's Bay this year when they play. So unless Woodland upsets Washougal, then all bets are off, right? I mean, at that point, then, it could be a little bit more of a mix and match. But I see what you're saying, right? But it would take a Herculean effort for me to fall in love with Lakewood. Like they would have to really go through the teams and then NWC to even make me really consider them on a high level,
Yeah, totally. No, I agree. It's you put them on your radar to kind of watch how they do in the next few weeks. I think this week they've got Burlington Edison, which I expect them to win. Burlington's pretty much gotten blown out the first 2 weeks. But
the Burlington Coat Factory.
Yeah, they've definitely been put to work in the factory the first couple weeks. But yeah, Stalakum's probably the other one that I'd put up there. But then again, I don't know what a team like they're scoring 35 and 40 points, but 20 to Washington, 21 to White River. Certainly not what Ording did to Washington. So that's I don't see another team. Maybe Othello, maybe Prosser that you could put in that 10 spot, but Ording thus far, they're kind of a wild card for sure.
Well, 16 teams are going to figure out a way to get there, So it's just this is where bids just really bother me, right? We can talk about that on another segment, another show, but this is just where bids just really grind my gears. But I'm all good on 2A. Let's just move to 3A real quick here.
So do some of the people who have the right to vote on these things.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
No, I mean, it's a totally different conversation to have altogether, but to me, it's I don't know. It's diluted. How about that? The playoff field's diluted. Let's go to 3A real quick. So number 1, the O'Day Irish, and then number 2, Yelm. Number 3, Eastside Catholic. Number 4, Kennewick. Number 5, Bellevue. 6, Garfield. 7, Monroe. 8, Mount Spokane. 9, Lincoln and Tacoma. And then at number 10, the Ferndale Golden Eagles. Number 1, the Irish, and number 2, Yelm, and number 3, Eastside Catholic. I know I'm just repeating the same thing again. Kennewick and Bellevue. I mean, that's as tough as a top 5 as it gets, buddy.
Yeah. O'Day, frankly, talked about their size on the O-line.
D-line, too.
Yep, D-line, too. But Jason Brown in 2 weeks, I think, has 15 carries for almost 400 yards and like 4 or 5 touchdowns. He hasn't even had to play a whole game yet,
which is good.
Certainly. So it's not like they've been totally tested. Where Yelm obviously was in week 1 by a great Camas team. Then they go from scoring 8 points to putting up 62 the next week. Did a lot of it through the air even. But I think, frankly, that's just where I'm at from a depth standpoint. O'Day's a notoriously deep team. And we all know why. They've had the ability to bring in the area's best players for a long time now. But, I think they have a little bit more physicality than most of the rest of it. That's no slight to 2 through 5 at all, but like we mentioned, you got 250, 260 playing defensive end that are fast too. They're not just 250-pound nose guards that you're sticking on the edge of your line, and then they go 300 across the O-line, one of the top running backs in the country, so that's why they're there. But Yelm stays at 2 just because they had such a scare in week 1.
But Camas looks tough, man. I mean, I don't know.
Certainly. But Yelm was all world last year. And so that's why, it's that close of a game. It's like they obviously rebounded, but then they turn around and give up to 34 to Union, who O'Day beat 40-0 the week before. So
I'm with you.
What Yelm team is, where is Yelm? I mean, they're obviously really good.
Some people
probably, and a lot of people probably don't know even where that is, but the Great Logging Town area, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think they're really, I had Yelm at 1 to start the year, and then slid O'Day to 1 last week. And I think the result, if you compare Union, granted Yelm scored 62, but giving up 34 to a team O'Day blanked. That's why I keep them where they're at. Eastside Catholic sits at 3 with, I guess talked about that week 1 loss. I wouldn't even call it a loss. Orange Lutheran is as good as it gets in California. Then they shut out Ballard 43-0. Moved Bellevue down a spot. Mainly just because they didn't finish that game. That's what worried me. It was,
and the fact that they lost.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like you got that big of a lead. Granted, Lake Stevens is great, but you had that big of a lead and you couldn't hang on. pretty much got shut out in the second half. We kind of like the Seahawks this last week. Really looked great in the first half. Second half went totally awry. And Kennewick, for that matter, 54-0 last week. Week before that, 59-14 over Pasco. Pasco and Walla Walla aren't, I would say, difficult games, but still they look much the part this year. Garfield is down at 6. They moved down a spot, basically allowing Kennewick to leap from – well, Kennewick leaped them last week, but to start the year, I had Garfield at 5 and Kennewick at 7. So things have shaked out where Kennewick has essentially jumped Bellevue and Garfield just because they haven't had any hiccup or both games have been easy for them. Monroe stays at 7, beat Shorecrest 60-12. Expected them to win that game by quite a bit, which is good because some people looked at that week 1 game against Roosevelt and kind of, they only won by 9. But I think Roosevelt's a better team than people think. Mount Spokane stays at 8, right where they've been all year. Totally fine by me. Lincoln, I don't know much about Tualatin from Oregon. 3-point loss. Tualatin.
Yep.
Whatever. It's Oregon.
Whatever.
Yeah. The Ducks come from there. If I say an Oregon town name wrong, it doesn't bother me.
Hey, I'm your all on the border of Oregon. Foremost authority here.
Best thing about Oregon is the sales tax.
You have to pump your own gas now in Oregon, man. They're finally like real people.
I feel bad for the people who, it was a good job to create, but I hated having someone pump my gas down there. So
yeah, you ever get out and be like, I got this. I do it every day. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
They look at you like you have no idea what you're about ready to do.
Yeah, I'm not going to set your gas station on fire. Don't worry. So Lincoln stays at 9 from last week. My biggest concern with Lincoln, though, is 17 points in week 1 against Auburn Riverside and 14 last week. I thought they'd have a higher powered offense than that. So I feel totally comfortable having them at 9 or 10, which that was kind of questioned preseason when I had them. I released them at 10, and they haven't done anything in my eyes to leapfrog these other teams ahead of them. And then Ferndale comes in at 10 to replace Stanwood because they beat Linden, and their O'Carver win wasn't overly impressive. But Ferndale's not going to win games by an impressive margin. It's just not how they're set up. They're like Enumclaw in that regard for me. I don't think it matters to them how many points they score. They just want to play defense and run the ball and play smash mouth football. So if that's a 1-point win, then that's fine.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I'll take a 3-point win over Linden any day.
Yep.
I don't care when it happens and what the circumstances were to get it. I do agree that I think that Lincoln's a little bit like the largest question mark here. And Lakes is getting a lot of respect around the area there in the Tacoma zone. So, by the time the season's over with, we might be talking about them a little bit more than we're talking about Lincoln.
Pilchuck. You could put Pilchuck in there.
Yeah, I'm not ready to. I'm not
Me
ready.
neither.
Yeah, I'm not ready. I'm with you. I think you're fine holding off here for another week. Like I said, the question of that game is how good is Pilchuck, or how much of a downgrade is Stanwood from last year, and they may not be. Right, styles make football games. And the way games play out sometimes obviously don't go to plan. And when you're run heavy and, don't run with the effectiveness that Stanwood needs to run with in their wing T offense to be successful, it's a big unknown, man. You really don't know what you're getting. But I do like O'Day still at 1. This is probably a little bit, I don't know, off the cuff, I think maybe for some people, but I would probably have Eastside Catholic above Yelm in terms of if an actual football game is played, who would I take in the game? I would take Eastside Catholic right now. That's where I would lean in that corner, even though that they have endured a loss. It's just due to the fact that who they played and who they lost to. I got no problem with Yelm being at 2 because I think that to a degree they've earned it to be at 2, they might even still have earned to be number 1. Camas could be a team that makes a deep run in 4A. We really don't know quite yet, So I think there's a lot of unknowns in that regard, and I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like I think Eastside Catholic would probably be favored to win that game, and they would have a lot to play for too, Tyson. I mean, having the state championship legitimately ripped out of your hands.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about like an opportunity for redemption. I see why Bellevue's at 5 because they're probably a top 5 team in 3A. But when you don't have a win on the season, it's kind of hard for me to have you in the top 5. But again, I look at the long term, right? And I think long term Bellevue is going to be just like they were last year. That they're going to lose a couple games to some really good teams, and then they're going to come out and they're going to be a game away from the championship, maybe in the championship, right? I mean, they just really lost to Yelm in the semis last year, and they got a very strong running game. And you know what I like to say, right? The postseason is all about like who has the best running game, who can endure the weather, who can endure the all the hits and the injuries and stuff, who's best built for the postseason. Bellevue's always going to be one of those teams that's built for the postseason.
Yep, and we had the same exact conversation about them at this point in the year last year too.
Oh yeah,
started off 0-2,
laying in the weeds.
Sometimes I think some rankings they dropped out of the top 10 altogether, and it was like, how do you not have them up there? Because then they go on that playoff run and beat Johnson and Lincoln by 2. Pretty much blow Meade out, and then lose by 1 to Yelm in the semifinal. So yeah, only 0-2 team I have on any of my top 10s.
Sure. I think Kennewick might have one of the more underrated defenses in the top 10. So they're a team that is going to be in almost every game that they play. So we'll see. They're going to have a couple of games, I believe. Off the top of my head, still against Kamayakin and Chiawana in a couple of league, hybrids and stuff. So it'll be a great opportunity for them to possibly move up your rankings.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like I said, they've already climbed 3 spots, and they got a tough one this weekend or this Thursday with Sunnyside. That's a game we probably should have put on our picks. I don't think we did, but.
Yeah, I feel.
And then they go.
Yeah,
they got a really tough schedule. Really, then they go Kamayakin, then they go Chiawana, and then they go Richland, a school that just had like 800 yards against Hermiston, Hanford, Southridge. Those should be kind of their, easier games, I would say. But they've got quite the onslaught here. Just Sunnyside, Kamayakin, Chiawana, and Richland. That's not. It's not the cream of the crop in 3A, but it's teams that are going to give you a good shot for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that 3A still has probably I still feel this way. I still feel it has like the most realistic teams that can win a championship. Like I think that there's legitimately 5 teams that could win a title depending on how things go, depending on matchups.
Yep, for sure. No, I agree with 1 through 5. I pretty much feel that way about. And
yeah.
Mount Spokane at full capacity. Mentioned it earlier. I really love when a team has a quarterback and a wide receiver that hook up every week, no matter what. It's like Stafford and Cooper Kupp, 2 years ago.
Who? That guy that's on IR?
Unfortunately, but hey,
yeah.
Washington. I should get his jersey to go right there. So I've got another NFL dude there's lots of them, but then I could have the east side of the state represented. But anyways, I think them at full health, they're a threat to do some damage. Haberman's really an underrated quarterback when it comes to this classification, and I assume they'll put a lot more points on the board next week than they did this last week playing number 3. QB3. So anyways, it's but I totally agree with what you said about 5 teams that seem like they could have a legit chance.
Legit chance. Let's go to 4A. Round it out, and then we'll talk some athletes and show a video of some top plays. All right. At number 1, yeah, I got a huge problem with this. Graham Kapowson at number 1. No, I'm just kidding. Lake Stevens at 2. You could honestly be 1 and 1 right there.
Coin flip, yeah.
Skyview at 3. Emerald Ridge at 4. Bothell at 5. Mount Si at 6. Your boys, Moses Lake at 7. Curtis at 8. Camas at 9. Kamaikan drops down to 10. You know, like I said just a second ago, I mean, I think you could really coin flip GK and Lake Stevens. You know, Lake Stevens, I think, has the more impressive of the wins between the two teams. But, like I said earlier,
by differential only.
I think GK might actually have more firepower and might actually have a slightly better defense. So I don't know quite yet how that matchup would shake down. But I do know that I've got no problem with those two teams being 1 and 2.
Yeah. It kind of works in pairs for the most part, especially 1 through 6 on here. I feel like GK and Lake Stevens, you could have them either or. Say the same thing about Skyview and Emerald Ridge, although Skyview's win over Jesuit, I think, is what gives them that 3 spot for sure. Bothell and Mount Si, that'll be an interesting matchup when it comes time this year. Frankly, Bothell didn't have a great season last year, but they picked up one of the best junior quarterbacks I think that there is out there in the state, and it's helped them tremendously offensively. Mount Si's only got 1 game under their belt. It was an impressive win for sure over Spanaway Lake. Moses Lake, I don't see how you don't. To revisit rankings earlier, like you talked about, I don't see how you can't have them in the top 10. I mean, every let's say real publication out there that covers high school sports in Washington, all they did was rave about Kamaikan all off season, and that's their team to watch. They're the team on the rise. That went on and on and on. And no mention of Moses Lake. And frankly, Moses Lake goes down there on the road, has to sit around for an hour and a half after losing 7-0 and having like 4 false starts in the first quarter. I could see a scenario where they easily get blown out of that game because of the way they came out and started. And then you got to sit around for an hour and a half. So by the time thinking the game's not going to start again, you got a 2-hour bus ride home. I didn't get home till almost 1 o'clock in the morning that night. And they got home later than I did. So to not have them in the top 10 for anybody blows my mind. It's the one thing I will definitely boast about rankings wise. I saw that coming to start the year, and they're for real. I wish we could have got a chance to visit with Coach Jay tonight. Maybe we will another week this year, but I think he's probably one of the best coaches in the state from just observing him for 2 weeks. Love the way that he carries himself. His whole coaching staff carries himself. They've got that whole team bought in, believing that they deserve to be there. And they'll get an opportunity to continue to prove it with teams like Eastmont coming up. So that'll be a fun game. Probably one of the best games of the year last year with the craziest finishes, minus Yelm and Eastside Catholic. But Curtis comes in at 8 because all they've done is win big week 1 and then win a dogfight with Sumner, who frankly is a coin flip for me with Kamaikan at the 10 slot. And I just ultimately chose Kamaikan because their defense has shown to be stout through 2 weeks, only surrendering 15 and 13 points. Maybe it's a question mark whether their offense is as explosive as Sumner, but I'll take defense when it comes to that category. And Camas could be ranked higher than 9, but they were so off my radar and they've been such a surprise. I kind of don't know where to put them yet. So a few more weeks and who knows, you can see them sitting at number 5.
Can I make one just, I guess, observation and maybe you can walk me through kind of what you're thinking on it here. But with Kinko being completely undefeated, into this point in the season, you've also got North Creek in there. You've also got Woodinville in there. What would be your, I guess, reasoning, if you had any, to where you would have like a Camas with one loss up in that conversation above that, just solely based on the fact that they lost to Yelm by 1 and beat Glacier Peak? I mean, I don't know if it's that that's a more impressive schedule than what the other teams have played, but Woodinville's looked pretty solid so far here, and North Creek equally. They eliminated Camas last year in the postseason.
Yeah, I think it's just basically it's because it was Yelm. I expected Yelm to win that game 50-12, kind of like they did all year last year to everybody. And frankly, pretty much returned the exact same team. I mean, Kyler was a great player, but it's only one guy. I'm sure they lost a few more than that. Brian probably let me know if there's some kids I'm leaving out. Oh, there was a linebacker, Ray. Shoot, I don't remember his full name, but he was good too. But they've got plenty of guys there, and I would say, I don't know anything about that Hawaii team that Woodinville beat them soundly, but I would say Yelm is better than, say, like you talked about Kinko. Say Yelm's way better than both the Skyline's two opponents, for example. So basically that win, and I think Glacier Peak is going to upset a couple teams this year. Last year was kind of we had lofty expectations for them last year, and then they ultimately kind of got Linden Christianed there at the end of the year by not even getting in the playoffs. But they're a better team than I think we probably think they are this year. And for Camas to hang 55 on them, I had a hard time leaving them out.
Time will tell. I think that if you're looking for the best quarterbacks in the class, it's 4A by far. And so, when I look at the top 10 around here, I see a lot of teams with a lot of really good quarterbacks.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean.
And Kennedy Catholic's not even in here. And they got Forehand, Spurbeck's not even in here. So, I mean, there's a lot of good quarterbacks here.
Yeah, Kennedy Catholic I had in there last week.
Sure.
Frankly, I took him out because I thought if they played Curtis, I think Curtis wins that game. And that was really the only – I could easily – like I said, Camas and Kamiakin – or not Camas and Kamiakin. Well, they are too, but Sumner is a team that still, even though they only lost by 5 to Curtis, they're still got a good enough first couple of games to deserve mention. Eastmont's a team we're not discussing that, again, doesn't win by a lot of points, but went on the road, beat Meade 28-19, and then beat a Timberline team that everybody's thinking is going to be in the playoffs 21-14 that just blew Kelso out 31-3. Chiawana's still going to be a good team. North Creek, obviously, has been solid the last couple of years.
Sure.
Richland's offense is crazy high-powered so far. And then I've also got on here Eastlake, which they were, they had lofty expectations last year, and I'm just kind of waiting for like a prove it game to think that they're for real. But even going way down the radar, not that they've played a tough schedule, but even Newport of Bellevue has my attention, winning 51-7 against Nathan Hill and 42-3 versus Cascade. Granted, I don't think they're better than Kamiakin, Camas, Sumner, Chiawana, Eastmont, North Creeks of the world, Woodinvilles. But there's plenty of teams that have kind of got to watch. About week 5, we'll know a little bit more about most of them.
Well, we'll have an opportunity to revisit some next week, because next week we got to go over Skyview taking on Bothell. We'll talk about that here in a little while, but yeah, I mean, we'll work it out. I just wanted to throw it out there that I think it's worth considering that there could be a couple teams in the Kinko that are on your feed down here, and then Chihuahua as well. I mean, after the week 1 loss to Kamayakin, I think we all kind of collectively agreed that they got the type of team and they got the type of schedule that could allow them to run the table the rest of the way and possibly enter the postseason with just 1 loss. So, I mean, there's teams out there that are still not on the ticker there at the bottom. And, I mean, a lot's going to work itself out, honestly. And this is another one of those, classifications that's super deep, and it may have Graham Kapowson at the top and Lake Stevens, but I think that everybody after that, in that 3 through 12 to 14 range, I think it's really just going to come down to matchups because I think there's a lot of really good teams.
Yeah, for sure. No, it'll be a good round of 16 when it gets to that point.
Yeah. All right. So, let's talk some athletes, some performances from last week. We're kind of running a little bit long right now, even though Devin's not here. Somehow we're filling all of this time. We're just a shade under 2.5 hours right now. Let's run through some athletes here real quick, and then we got a highlight video of our top 10 plays. And then we will get into the games that we're going to pick this week, and we'll do a couple of good previews and kind of just go through the picks fairly quickly. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
We'll kind of push through it. I want to get to this highlight video here in a little bit. It's pretty good. Let's just start with some performances. I'm going to just start here in 4A. I'm more top heavy this week on player performances. So if I'm missing any, type them into the live stream comments and we'll get to them here. But I want to start with a name. I love the name. Indiana Jones, baby. Of Kennedy Catholic. This guy had the trifecta: a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and an interception return for a touchdown for Kennedy Catholic in the win over Highline. And then sticking in the same game, the quarterback for Kennedy Catholic, Devin Forehand, 3 passing touchdowns in the win. I'm going to stick in 4A here. And, I mean, I'm obviously going to mention Rocco, not Diet Coke, for Curtis. 17 for 20, 240 yards. That's good all by itself with a touchdown. But when you also throw in the fact that he rushed 28 times for 173 yards and 4 more scores on the ground, I mean, that makes that probably like the most impressive performance in the entire state for the week. For
sure. Yeah, workhorse. Literally did everything for his offense. I got do you have any more?
Yeah, go ahead. You're fine.
I'll go to from the same team, both twins, actually. Damian Ialona, 26 of 32 for let's say that's 290. My Sharpie was a little thick, so I couldn't tell if that was a 4 or 9.
Nothing wrong with having a thick Sharpie.
Yeah, I think that was 290 and 4 touchdowns. And then hooking up with his twin brother, Marius Ialona, 11 catches for 138 and 3 touchdowns. So
little brother to brother.
Yep. Twins getting it done in the air for Yelm, which is not something they totally relied on last season. I mean, they were a pretty balanced attack, but granted they scored 62 points, so I'm sure they ran the ball pretty well too.
I'll go back to 4A for another. Tony Harst of Emerald Ridge only needed 3 catches to get 174 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win over the Olympia Bears. I mean, that's like maximum efficiency, and you're averaging nearly 60 yards per catch.
Future teammate of Holden B too.
Yeah, well, he'll enjoy that target.
Yeah, definitely.
What else you got?
A kid that I watched, I don't have an exact stat line. This is an estimate, but in that Kamiakin Moses Lake game, Camden Schmidt, he doesn't have a social media presence that I've seen, but
does he have a social security?
Hopefully. Senior safety from Kamaikan also played some running back. I don't have offensive stats, but I would imagine he had about 50 yards rushing on like 3 carries. But on defense, 12 tackles approximate. He did have a for sure interception, but of all the tackles he did make, I want to say he had 4 of the first 6 plays Moses Lake ran. He was in on the tackle, and 3 of them were hits. He was coming up decleating people. Just a player I wanted to highlight because Cuckoo, somebody Devin mentioned last week in their secondary that I think has a little bit more attention to his name, but I was very impressed by Schmidt that you don't find kids played in secondary like that very often. And then Keegan Howard from Lake Stevens, 18 tackles on defense against Bellevue. Also had 3 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown.
I'm going to stay with that Bellevue. Oh, excuse me. Is it the Bellevue game? Oh, gosh darn it. I had it here for a second. Here it is. No, 3A, though. I hope I'm saying it right. Chris McCone of Lakes. He had 23 total tackles on defense, including a forced fumble and a rushing touchdown against River Ridge. I mean, 23 solo tackles. That is big time.
Busy.
Side of the ball. I knew where I was going with the Bellevue game. The running back Carson Rubin, 200 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns in the loss to Lake Stevens. Very much worth mentioning.
Oh, for sure. I've probably got more 3A guys than I do anything else this week.
Fire them off.
I'll start from – you want me to do all of them or just a few at a time?
Yeah, we'll just go a few at a time.
All right, so I'll start at the bottom of my list. Asa Thompson of Eastside Catholic, 5 catches for $140 and 2 tutties. And then we've got Xavion Jones from Mount Lake Terrace with 252 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns.
Nice. I found some numbers here on Kai Laukkanen of Capital, wide receiver, 11 catches, 189 yards, and 3 tutties. On defense, he also had a forced fumble and an interception, albeit in a loss against the Kelso Highlanders just down the street from us here. And then of a Seattle Prep, quarterback Bo Oaksmith, 252 yards passing and 4 touchdowns in the win over Rainier Beach.
Impressive. I've got 2 more bows for you since we'll little transition there. Bodie Gardner, so not straight bow, but 3 catches for 109 and a touchdown in that game where he really did everything they needed him to. 2 carries for 28 and a touchdown. Then had a 96-yard kick return and a 73-yard punt return, both called back in that game. So his impact was even greater than the stat sheet, but still 130 yards and 2 touchdowns and a 28-20 victory. And then with the other Bo, it's Bo Reisenauer, also from Spokane of Central Valley. He was 17 of 29 for 295 and 3 touchdowns last week. So pretty solid game through the air.
Yeah, no, for sure. The final 3A athlete that I've got down here, excuse me, I got 2 more. My bad. The game that I called, actually, surprisingly enough, I'm going to mention it. Mercer Island quarterback, Spencer Kornblum, 16 of 22, 334 yards and 5 touchdowns total in the game, 4 of them by the air against R.A. Long. First win in just over 2 seasons, or a season and a half, I should say, for Mercer Island. Snapping an 11-game losing streak. And then the final 3A player that I've got here is of Kentwood. And you might see a little bit more about this player a little bit later on here, but Antoine Lee. He had 148 yards rushing and a touchdown. He also had a spectacular special teams play in the game. I'll leave it at that.
Is that to win it, kick return?
I cannot confirm nor deny that.
I think that's what happened. I have, I've got 6 more. I'll run through them real fast. Raylan Witherspoon, 8 carries, $149 and 2 touchdowns for Garfield. So what is that? My math isn't mathing right now. Probably somewhere around 16 yards a carry. Zamari Mitchell of Kamiak in a losing effort, 15 tackles, a sack and a forced fumble. Aiden Nicholson of Mountain View, 6 catches for $140, 3 touchdowns, and an INT on defense in their win over Ridgefield. Jason Brown, this one's ridiculous, 8 carries for 240 and 4 touchdowns.
Stop.
Yeah, 30 yards a carry.
Oh, my God.
And then 2 more from the Spokane area. Quarterback John Olson of Ferris was 18 of 21 for 206 and 6 touchdowns. Super efficient. And then a wide receiver from Cheney had, I don't know if he had 285 receiving. It said all-purpose, but 5 catches, 285 all-purpose yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Can we just yeah. Yeah. I'm just gonna move to 2A real quick. I just saw a comment that came into the live stream that I think needs some addressing here, honestly. All right. I'm just gonna move to 2A real quick. I don't have many beyond this, guys, just to be honest with you. So
I'll address that one real quick.
We'll hold on. Let's just get through
right.
Let's give the athletes their due, and then we'll do that later. So I'm just gonna go to Tumwater real quick. Combination here. Ethan Kastner, the quarterback, a perfect 9 for 9, 134 yards and 4 tutties in the win on the road against North Kitsap. And then his wide receiver target, Mr. Brady Bryant, he catches 4 passes for 59 yards, but he hauled in all of the touchdown passes. I mean, what are you doing? That is like the ultimate wide receiver Al Bundy stat line.
Yeah, for sure. Definition of efficient. Tumwater, I don't think they completed 9 passes in a game last year. So.
Well, I mean, they completed every one that they threw in this one. So
exactly. Yeah. No, that heck of a game for both of them. Iron Man. I gave out this award a few times last year, but this one's deserving this year. Karsten Reynolds, Cedar Woolley, 16 of 20 for 151, 3 touchdowns. It's at 8 rushing attempts for 122 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 10 tackles on defense. Kid that we mentioned last week was playing quarterback. This week he played wide receiver. Tyson Glenn Thomas, 11 catches, 142 yards after throwing for 206 and 3 touchdowns last week. And then he also had 9 tackles and an interception on defense out of Lindbergh.
I got one more 2A player, and I think it's Sharon Seniors of Ording, running back, 102 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Seniors.
Yeah, it's an interesting spelling.
I'd love to get the kid on and get a correct pronunciation. We might talk a little bit more Ording, that's for sure. Honestly, buddy, the well was dry on my end down here for trying to scour up some more 1A and 2B performances. It's kind of up against the clock doing some dad stuff today, but yeah.
I got a good list. 3 more 2A guys.
Cool.
Mason Armstrong from Rochester, 15 carries for 143 and 3 touchdowns. This is a kid, his stat line this week was more workhorse-ish. Great stat line. That I mentioned earlier, Ty Webster of Sammamish, 32 carries for $150 this week. But last week we didn't mention him, and he had 28 carries for 288 and 2 touchdowns. So I just wanted to note that.
Noted.
If we're going to use Max Preps as our resource, he is the leading rusher in the state at this point.
I see what you did there.
In the 2A class. Brock Beener, again, on there last week, but this week really only played 2.5 quarters, maybe 8 carries. First one was for 73 yards, but 8 carries for 154 yards, 3 touchdowns, and continues to rack up the sacks, and he had a sack, 6 tackles, and a fumble recovery on defense. That's what I'm done with 2A at that point.
Yeah, I mean, keep on rolling.
All right, 1A. How many 1As you got?
The only one that I saw was I think it's Xander Jump. Is that it?
Yeah.
For Hoquiam?
Mhm.
5 total touchdowns in their team's win. So that was the only one that I was able to conjure up.
That's good performance. I've got a list of 8 guys here. Caden LaPlante from Granite. Sorry, I nerded out for about 2 hours here.
I'm glad.
This afternoon. Tonight before we ate dinner and stuff. Caden LaPlante, 16 of 27 for 341 and 5 touchdowns against Friday Harbor. And then his receiver, Jonathan Roberts. This is one of those pairings of quarterback wide receiver I love that's going to have big weeks all year. Jonathan Roberts, 7 catches for 146 and 3 touchdowns, and even had 2 of them called back. You mentioned Jackson Wilson earlier, so there's one that you do have. With the 2 passing touchdowns, rushing touchdown, 250-plus yards, and 2 picks in their Montesano's win. This kid I think we have a highlight for. Braden Dunham of Colville, 202 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns last week in their big win over North Central. Colton Lentz scored 4 touchdowns against Connell, 3 on the ground and 1 in the air. And then the last 3 is Lance Gogol, who was on here last week, 129 yards and a touchdown, had 2 50-plus yarders called back for holding. And then 2 more running backs, Jalen Ward of La Center, 18 carries for 124 and 2 touchdowns, and Braden Kalk of Kings, 11 carries for 124 and 3 touchdowns.
I want to throw in an asterisk here for Xander Jump of Hoquiam. 4 rushing touchdowns, 1 passing touchdown, and an interception return for a touchdown.
That's a heck of a game.
So that is just big time.
Like hitting for the cycle.
Yeah, dude, that's like that's big time.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a 2B category at all?
Yep, I've got 6 names.
Perfect. Let's go.
2 from Raymond South Bend. Farrell Johnson, 12 carries for $166 and 2 touchdowns, and his backfield mate Robert Stigel, 12 carries for 136 and 3 touchdowns. So 35 of those 62 Raymond South Bend came on the legs of those guys. And then 2 more teammates, both of Riverview. Hyatt Clark, quarterback, 11 of 17 for 243 and 3 touchdowns. And all 3 of his touchdowns went to wide receiver Trace Teagle, who had 5 catches for $145. Defensive guy out of Kalama, Dylan Jones, 12 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. And then my pick to lead the state in rushing, Brody Bonus, 14 carries for 302 and 5 touchdowns.
Jason Brown had a higher average. That's not even that good. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, yeah. I mean, one's a big-time recruit. The other one's a small-town kid that's just going to run through your face. So,
yeah.
Well, big numbers so far.
Quite the performances, my man. Those were some big numbers for some kids.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right.
It's always fun looking up stat lines.
Yeah. All right. So guess what? We got a highlight video for you. All right. Make sure you unmute your mic if you want to talk to me all here. So let's go ahead and run through it. These are our top 10 plays as submitted by you, the athletes, coaches, and we wrote it down. So hopefully, you like it. Let us know. We're going to post it separately on our timelines, probably tonight, tomorrow, something like that. So enjoy. Here's our top 10 plays of the week.
Ready, down.
So leading it off, we got takes the handoff left side and then puts the truck stick down. Oh, boom, get off me. What game you're at here, Mr. Hayden Throneberry of Moses Lake seals the deal with the INT to pull off the upset in the 5-hour game against Mayakin. And then at number 8, we've got Parker Jackson of Snohomish. Look at him go over the defender, put a foot down in a loss in the game last week. And then we got of Ferndale, Isaiah Udman, toe tapping on the sideline. What a catch there at number 7. At number 6, Ryan Boyle in stride up the seam, 88 yards to the house. Everyone's excited. The camera's shaking, and he breaks a tackle at the 20, puts a stiff arm, and then gives him the pose. Mercer Island rolls against R.A. Long. And then we got a tie at number 5. Athlete Zach Robertson of Fife fumbles the snap, picks it up, and goes to the end zone. But, we had another broken play, so we had to do a co-5. Andres Cortez hits Austin May in the broken play in the back of the end zone for Federal Way. And then at number 4, your boy, Braden Dunham of Colville, takes the handoff up the middle, scoots out to the left side, and he is off to the races, as it says in the bottom of the screen that you can't see, to the crib.
To the crib. Half of his yardage on that one run.
At number 3, we got Isaiah Kuehler of Glacier Peak. It's a 90-yard kickoff return for the touchdown. Look at the highlights here put together by STPSN. Too bad that they lost that game by 5 scores, 55-20, but that's a nice play there. At number 2, check out this play from River Ridge quarterback Darian Harper. Slow motion, dive it over into the end zone. It's 6. But at number 1, Tyson already knew. Antoine Lee of Kentwood does exactly what every coach says you shouldn't do. Field the ball at the 1-yard line on a punt, but look, it turns out to be the best decision of his life as he cuts it back in between the hashes, gets a block, and now he is off to the races to win the game against Peninsula. Look at that shot along the sideline as he is going to finish it off into the end zone for the top play of the week. What do you think about that?
What a return. I mean, whirling dervish all the way around, basically through the end zone, and I'm surprised he had the legs to finish it off.
Don't field the punt at the 1. It's like coach is throwing his headset, the clipboard, and then all of a sudden, yes, that's exactly what I wanted you to do. Ooh, way to go.
I thought I read that might have been as time was expiring.
Still, I mean, they could have called it a safety if he gets tackled catching it at the 1 going into the end zone. You know what I mean? So, I mean, he definitely that was almost like 100-yard. But anyway.
He probably ran 120 yards on that or more.
Athletes, thank you so much for sending your plays into Tyson and Devin, who is not here in 3 dimensions, but he was able to send over some highlights that you uploaded to him on your Twitter or through your DMs. So if you want to be featured, then go ahead and send them in, and we will get them cut up as long as they're worthy. We did have to cut out a couple, but that punt return highlight is bonkers, Justin. I mean, running backwards into the end zone and then going across the field one way, cutting it back through the middle. The key, though, to that was the block that he got right around the 50. That block is ultimately what made it possible, because even if that guy doesn't tackle him right there, it at least slows him up to allow the other guy to come into the play and possibly make the tackle. But, Antoine Lee of Kentwood, you are the number 1 play of the week. Congratulations.
Yeah, heck of a play. I don't think there was one more deserving than that, especially with its implications.
Dude, Darian Harper, though, like of River Ridge, like up and over, selling out. Like if any other week, that's number 1 for me probably, because that was just like who was the guy that played for Arizona who did that against Washington in like 97 or something like that? I think it was like Michael Jenkins or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, there was a dude for Arizona who was a quarterback who literally like jumped completely in the air, Superman style, from like the 5-yard line, and like did a complete front flip on his feet into the end zone to help beat Washington back in the day. So you were probably not even born then, Tyson. So
I was. That was what, Brock Huard's year?
Oh, I'm sure he was there. Yeah, right around then. All right. So again, thank you everybody. Appreciate it. I got to go back to something here real quick before we get into the picks for this week. It's on the screen right here, Tyson. James Starrett. Thanks, James. Appreciate you being a part of the live stream comment section. Thank you so much. Graham Kapowson is not number 1. Way off. Max Preps has Lake Stevens number 1 in the state. GK has No business being number one. Come on, James. You don't really believe that. Like, it's okay, if you like Lake Stevens, if you got a kid that plays on Lake Stevens, I totally get it, right? And they are the defending state champions, right? But they didn't win that game by 100, right? They won it by 2. GK has got like so many good players, and they are definitely going to be worthy of consideration for number one. If you want to coin toss it, I'm totally fine with that. But to sit here and say that they've got no quote business being number one, come on, man. Like
I would just say there's a reason I have my own rankings now, James. I used Max Preps all of last year and was led astray quite a few times. So, I'm looking at Max Preps rankings right now. Just
Max Preps has Ilwaco at 33.
Let's just go over their 4A top 10. They've got
Max Preps knows, like, I'm not going to say nothing, right? Because I think Lake Stevens is very deserving of potentially being number one. But to sit here and say that Graham Kapowson is not even close to number one, come on. Like, you don't really believe that, right?
Well, here's Max Preps top 10. Lake Stevens 1, GK 2, Curtis at 3, Emerald Ridge 4, Skyview 5, which don't understand that. But Sumner at 1-1 is sitting at 6.
Come on.
Camas 7, 1-1. Kennedy Catholic 8, 1-1. Eastlake at number 9. Above Moses Lake, who has a where do they even have Kamiakin? Kamiakin's down at 15. Skyline at 10. Moses Lake 11, 12. Yeah.
Justin,
I wouldn't rely on Max Preps as your end all be all.
Justin, get the videos of the kids scoring those plays. Send them in, man. We'll gladly get them on. But we're not here like trying to be in competition with everybody else. Like, everybody else does their own independent research, right? This isn't about like we want to be more right than anybody else. But I can promise you this: we watch a lot, right? We watch a lot of film. We watch a lot of box scores, and not only do we watch this year's stuff, we watch last year's stuff too, right? We know Lake Stevens is good. They had some guys to replace from last year. Obviously, the quarterback play has been phenomenal thus far. But I mean, let's just pump the brakes on the no business talk. All right, like
if you listened, it was a coin flip too. That was kind of we think those teams are by far the most two talented in that classification. But if I'm going to line them up specifically offensively, especially when you're 5 D1 targets deep on Graham Kapowson, there isn't another team in the state that has that. So,
I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, Bellevue blew the game, right? I mean, yes, Lake Stevens came back and won it, but you don't amass a 28-7 lead by accident. It's not because you're lucky, Right. I mean, no offense here, right? I mean,
They're tightened up, and
it was a 3-point win. They beat Bellevue much more handedly last season, right? So I'm not here to like say that Lake Stevens shouldn't be considered number one. They definitely should be considered. I've got no problem, Tyson. I have no problem if you put them at number one. If you want to put them at number one, that's totally fine with me. I'm not gonna sit here and kick and scream, right? But let's just assume that like there's an AP vote going on here, right? Let's just say that Tyson's rankings has 15 guys voting on these rankings, right? 8 of those first place votes are going to go to Lake Stevens. The other 7 are probably going to go to Graham Kapowson, realistically, right? Sure. So this whole like plateau of they've got no business of being considered number one. Stop it. Just stop it. They might play each other and it might be a close game and Lake Stevens might win, right? But
for sure.
I'm not in the business of saying that in week number 2 of the season, heading into week number 3, that it's so far above and beyond, that they're. I mean, James, right? So James, so realistically, right? What would be the tougher league, right? South Puget Sound League or Wesco 4A, right? I just want to know, right? Because you got what, Kamiak, Jackson, who else? Mariner, Glacier Peak, Lake Stevens.
Yeah.
So you're going to take that league and tell me that list of opponents is going to be tougher than, say, Graham Kapowson's playing Puyallup, Sumner, Emerald Ridge, Curtis, even getting down into the Bethels of the world,
Right.
I mean, stop.
Yeah, I'll just say Max Preps relies on their scores from fans watching the game, and sometimes the score isn't even accurate. So I don't think their computer that they have making their rankings is based off of much anything else other than score and common opponent schedule or
I will say
schedule
though
of their opponents.
I will say though that James, I greatly appreciate you watching. I greatly appreciate you lending your feedback into the live stream comment section. It gives us something to talk about and bounce ideas off of. I would just open your mind to the possibility, that there might be somebody that's a little bit better. So,
well, that take last year, I wholeheartedly 100% agree with them. But Graham Kapowson has improved since last year for sure.
Justin just keeps spitting facts here that they've got Castle Rock listed as have played 4 games so far. So it's like, and then, it's just.
There's not a lot of oversight and quality control that goes into their website. Most of it is what's input. It's like Wikipedia of high school sports.
I would love to get
coaches' input and fans.
If there's a representative to Max Preps available right now, type into the comment section and I will send you a link and you can make an appearance via video call right now and we will get you on the show. And you can name 5 players from Graham Kapowson off the top of your head, right? Or something to that matter, right? I will. Yeah, it says it's run by robots. So, I mean, I'm just, not interested, I saw Matt Evans' computer rankings earlier, okay? James, I don't know if you're familiar with Evans' rankings, okay? But Evans' rankings has Highline, right, as like number 42, okay? So rankings, done by computers and done by Max Preps don't mean shit, I'm just saying that it's closer than you think. It's way closer. It's so close that you could even consider like Skyview and Emerald Ridge to be in the same breath with Lake Stevens this year. Like I'm not like gonna sit here and anoint them like back-to-back champions right now. Like they may be, but sorry.
Yeah, no, you said it. You said it perfectly well. I would rather look at any rankings of somebody who has been watching the games over something that is based off of an algorithm any day of the week.
It just gives us something to talk about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's.
I used Max Preps all year last year. I mean, it helped with a lot of my opinions at first and getting the idea of where teams are ranked, but by the end of the year, I would say there was quite a few holes.
Saying something like that, though, that's like saying that Nooksack Valley's got no business being considered to be number 1, right? That's like saying Linden doesn't have any business considered to be number 1 or Tumwater doesn't have any business. It's like there's really not that much difference between 1 and 2 in almost every classification right now. Like I'll tell you what, the only class that I think that like realistically might be like the furthest gap is Napavine over everybody else. Other than that, I think every other class realistically 1 and 2 is fairly coin flippy, So
certainly, yeah, that will know more. Week 6, week 7, it may not. Who knows? But
all right,
at this point in the year,
I needed something to wake me up and get me good in
I'm just glad that you were listening, James, and my rankings made you think, because frankly, that's all I want people to do with them. That's just one man's opinion. So
I'm gonna put out rankings now just so I can piss people off. I mean,
debuting at number one. Yeah, debuting at number one next week will be the North Creek Jaguars. Okay, so yeah. I'm just telling you right now.
We all got our own algorithms, right?
Yeah. Oh, hey, sure. we're gonna put together like the most ridiculous. Like I'm gonna get like ratioed on my rankings. You know what I mean? Like there's not going to be any likes on them.
Yeah.
It's going to be it's gonna be straight ratioed.
You'll be losing followers.
Yeah. So debuting at number one, Hudson's Bay, they're 3-0, right? So obviously they're the best team. There's no reason to even consider otherwise. So
No, yeah, it's
all right. Let's just stop right there and let's go to our games and let's pick them and slightly preview them. If you guys got games that you want to nominate for us to pick, too bad. You could type them in and we might talk about them still and pick them for fun. Debuting at number one is Montesano, 100% after the win that they took over. Who do they play? White Swan this week or I don't know. Stirring the pot. Glad people are watching. I'm glad people are watching too. Like 9 of us. More people rewatch than watch live, to be honest with you. But James, I'm so glad that you stuck around. Thank you so much. They beat. Yeah, exactly.
We need more pot stirrers. A few more cooks in the kitchen are always.
Yes.
Sometimes
absolutely.
It's not a bad thing when it comes. It's like taking a call from Raider John back in the day on 950.
Yeah, no, just wait when I have Colville at number one next week.
Did you ever hear Irish Mankey that would always call into John Clayton show?
Yeah.
He thought Notre Dame was number one every single week, even if they're coming off of like three game losing streak.
Oh my God! Speaking of Notre Dame, it's like I always hated Lou Holtz. Right, like Lou Holtz on College Football Live with Mark Mayday from Penn State, like those two back in the day. Like Lou Holtz would always be, Notre Dame is the greatest team that's ever played football in the history of football. It's got it fixed in Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
It's true.
They do the magic tricks before the game.
It's like Rudy was still on the field.
Oh my God. I was so like disgusted having to listen to seriously though. They would have them pick like Notre Dame against Navy or Air Force or Army or Coast Guard. Like whoever they were playing from the service industry that week, it's like, Notre Dame against North Carolina. It's like, this isn't basketball, Lou.
No kidding. He was a little outdated with his opinions there.
All right. I'm having too much Lou Holtz fun right now. Okay, so let's go to some games of the week. Let's pick them. I don't know what Devin's picks are. Unfortunately, Devin's not able to be with us here tonight. So we're going to force him to DM us his picks before the games start on Thursday. And we will probably post them or make him post them so everybody has the receipts, like the kids say, So, buddy, I think you got the same list that I did here. So I think I'm just going to go straight down the list here.
Yeah, I wrote it down in the same order as you. Starting with Bothell at Skyview.
Yeah, so our 4A game of the week is Bothell at Skyview. And this figures to be a really good matchup here. These two teams played last year, like a lot of the teams on this list did. And it was Skyview who had to sit in traffic all day Saturday morning. And they had to go show up late to Bothell. They actually moved the start time back like an hour or hour and a half just so Skyview could get off the bus, get their pads on, and get a warm-up in. And they ended up taking out Bothell 28-10. And this season, Bothell's team looks a little bit better than what they did last season. Skyview, led by Jake Kennedy at quarterback, they had no problem last week dismantling Columbia River of the 2A rankings in the same city known as Hazeldale, Washington. I don't know about you, Tyson, but I still think Skyview's the better team of the two this time around as well. Although I think that even though the venue has changed, I think the game will be closer. So I'll take Skyview. I'll take Skyview -6.5.
Yeah, I agree. I like that spread. I wrote down kind of score predictions this week. I think it's going to be a close one. I got Skyview 28-24.
Yeah, I mean, I like that wheelhouse, somewhere between 4 and 6.5, 4 and 7. I think it's going to be a fairly close game. You know, the running back Jacob for Skyview, good player. Wide receiver,
So.
yeah, wide receiver Gavin Packard, a weapon. You know, and haven't looked at the forecast yet for this week, but it figures to be a good balance of offense for Skyview this year, and the defense has played lights out so far. I think that's really the X factor here in the game, Tyson, is the defense. I don't know if Bothell scores as many as you might think in this one, but I like 6.5, 7 more so than I like 4. And I think that you're looking at more like a between 14 and 17 points possibly scored for Bothell here.
It's hard to say. I mentioned VRs earlier, but he's such a good thrower of the ball. Can throw it multiple different angles. You know, he's getting all combining and all that kind of stuff. His arm slot and et cetera, et cetera. About as impressive as it gets. So I know he's going to make some plays against Skyview no matter what, but I think Skyview is just they're not turning things around as fast as Bothell is, and they had a good year last year. They're building on it. I expect them to keep it rolling. Anybody that can beat Jesuit 28-zip.
Yep. Defense, baby. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's move on. Sticking in 4A, Sumner at Emerald Ridge. Spartans, fresh off of a 5-point home loss to Curtis. Emerald Ridge, meanwhile, 2-0, looking every bit like we thought that they would, with a high-power offense, with Skokel and Harst. And I ultimately feel that that Sumner played a really good game last week, and that should not be overlooked. Meanwhile, Emerald Ridge takes care of Olympia. Olympia, they didn't look that great in week 1 against Curtis either. So, I don't know really what to make, I guess, of where the teams are at schedule-wise. This is probably the most real test for Emerald Ridge to this point. I still like Emerald Ridge winning this one here. I would go somewhere like probably 31-20 Emerald Ridge.
I have Emerald Ridge written down 31-21, so we're on the same board.
We have not shared any information to this point, folks.
Nope. So, yep. Not even talked about it.
Let's move on. North Creek at Mount Si, Battle of Cats. So you got the Jaguars against the Wildcats. This one's in Snoqualmie. One thing I really liked, by the way, both teams undefeated, North Creek at 2-0, Mount Si at 1-0. One thing I really like about how Mount Si went about their business last week, Tyson, was the balance. They ended up having 208 yards passing and 204 yards rushing. I mentioned that earlier when we were talking about last week's games. Ultimately, Spanaway really couldn't figure out which of the two areas that they wanted to focus on. And I think that plays a tremendous advantage against North Creek. Last year, it was 38-28. Mount Si going on the road, getting the win in Bothell against North Creek, and I have no reason to think otherwise here in this season's matchup. I'm going Mount Si, and I'm thinking somewhere in the tune of about 27-20.
Yeah, I'm going Mount Si too. I think they're going to put up points on people this year. I got it at 37-21.
Okay. Next game, I'll let you pick it first, but Issaquah at Woodinville, both teams 2-0. Last year, Woodinville 21-8 over Issaquah. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's going to be low scoring. Woodinville has had a pretty consistent defense this year. Frankly, I don't know much about either team from a personnel standpoint compared to some of the others that we have on our list, but I'm saying Woodinville 21-13, especially since they're the home team.
Yeah, I got Woodinville 24-10 here in this one, being the home team and the defense. I think it's going to be pretty hard for Issaquah to come up with a lot of scores in this one. So All right, let's move on to 3A real quick. We do have some crossover games. We'll get to those as we go. So I think we'll just go down the list here for right now and move into 3A. Our game of the week, Garfield at Seattle Prep. And we had a few games to choose from here in 3A. Ultimately, we went with this one just due to the fact that Seattle Prep is 2-0 and Garfield 1-1, having played a fairly tough schedule to this point. They might be in that, conversation for competing with the likes of O'Day and also the likes of Eastside Catholic. But Seattle Prep is also in that same conversation. A win right here, and you got to give the Panthers a lot of respect, I think, Tyson. Last year, it was 48-7, though, Garfield with the win. Ultimately, I think Seattle Prep is a lot better than last season, and Oak Smith is a good-looking quarterback for them. But when I break down the film, Garfield does things just a little bit quicker and just a little bit more crisper. So I'm going to go Garfield 34-21 on the road.
Same exact score written down.
You liar.
No, I swear. I'll show you right here. I got receipts.
Yeah.
34-21. Now you get to see my next few. But
that's crazy.
Yeah, just a little bit more firepower for Garfield. Both the Witherspoon boys, Clark, Kamanong. I have a lot of respect for what Seattle Prep's done, and I kind of had to talk myself out of this being a potential upset with it being on the road. But with the pedigree Garfield has on their team, they should win this game. And yeah, that's the same exact score. So we see it similarly, obviously.
Watch it be 34-21, and then James can tell us that they have no business being that close that we cheated.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep in 3A here. So Mount Tahoma at Spanaway Lake. Mount Tahoma, that's a sexy team according to some in the outside looking in rankings, if they exist. 2 losses to 2 pretty good teams. Meanwhile, Spanaway Lake, just got their rear ends handed to them by Mount Snoqualmie. Tough to really gauge how this one goes. Last year, it was really close. It was 20-14 with Spanaway Lake getting the win on the road. I think that personally, there's just too much Darian Clemens in this one for Mount Tahoma to ultimately defeat. Although I think it's going to be really close. I'm thinking like 27-24 Spanaway Lake.
I've got Spanaway Lake also. So far, we're agreeing about every game, but
that's too bad.
I did say I think Spanaway Lake's going to score some more points in this one. 38-27 is what I had it. So 2-score game.
All right. Another really good game here in 3A. We don't know how good these two teams really are yet, but it will be a good matchup, at least on paper. Mount Lake Terrace at Shorewood. Last season, when these two teams got together, it was MLT with the win, 26-3. I don't really know what to make too much of these two teams and their wins thus far. I believe Mount Lake Terrace just got off of winning a game against Snohomish last week by a couple, 35-20, something like that.
Yeah.
I ultimately don't know what to expect from the Rays here, or the whatever their name is, I guess. Like, that it looks like a devil ray in their in their logo there, but I know it's some crazy. I did a game for them last year in basketball, a couple games for them, but it's like, yeah, weird. But I'm going with the Hawks of Mount Lake Terrace here in this one, 24-17.
Yeah, they're the Storm Rays.
That's right. Yeah, Storm Rays. I don't know what the hell a Storm Ray is. But
me neither. What was your score?
24-17 MLT.
Okay, yep. I had Mount Lake Terrace as well. I think it's going to be the Xavion Jones show, who we mentioned earlier, with 252 and 4 touchdowns. So I've got a score differential of 37-19.
Maybe we'll actually pick a game different here.
Okay, this is
We're gonna
where
have to
eventually.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, I'm not interested in losing. Okay, I'm picking who I think is going to win. I know I'm down by 3 games thus far, but I'm not making crazy predictions here, and we haven't seen each other's picks, so this is all off the cuff.
Yeah.
Our 2A game of the week: Seaholm at Cedro Woolley. Very interesting matchup here, Tyson. These two teams were scheduled to play a game last season, and ultimately it was Cedro getting the win, but by forfeit because of a hazing issue that had taken place with Seaholm within the program. So you really don't have a lot to go off of from last year's team, other than the fact that you look at the common opponents. Cedro ends up getting into the playoffs, but Seaholm ends up giving the teams that boat raced Cedro the most trouble. So it's really kind of difficult to gauge here which direction you're going to go. Both teams are 2-0 so far this season. These games are important. Every one of these games is like a playoff game already because only 2 teams are going to make the playoffs out of the NWC. Ultimately, I chose Seaholm in this one, and I got it at 24-20.
Got a similar score, but I chose Cedro.
Good.
27-24. I don't know necessarily what to pin it on.
Probably Carson Reynolds.
Yeah, I was gonna say Seaholm doesn't have a Carson Reynolds, and even though Cedro did get whooped by Anacortes in that game last year, I would say in the trenches this year after Seaholm graduated a few guys, I think that's where this game is going to be won. And I like logging towns, so there's my reasoning.
Bro, there's logging towns all over Washington. Get over
there
it.
There is, but hey, like Yelm, great logging town, great football team.
You can't go 15 miles without finding a logging town on the west side, at least, of the mountain range. So,
maybe where you are, but otherwise it's pretty much Glacier Peak, Darrington, and Cedro.
All right. So we finally disagree on one. So, all right. Next game in 2A, Olympic versus Bremer.
Ooh. We got a shot from Auntie M about how we're now very entertaining and now worth watching this late tonight because James lit a fire under us. Hey,
sounds like a compliment to me.
We'll take any dynamite we can get.
Yeah, hey, I mean, we're not in the business of trashing high school kids and teams and stuff. So, I mean, we'll keep it within the bounds of acceptable debate and trash talk. But I love the interaction. Guys, this is what the live stream comment section's for. I mean, say whatever you want, spark conversation. We would love to hear it. This is where we have our natural, ability to kind of use our personalities and such and really kind of show who we are and what we think and what we believe. We could sit here and write down names on paper and rehearse stuff all day, but I mean, this is all authentic, and yeah, we're happy to be as authentic. Look at our interviews with the coaches. We're as authentic as it gets. So, appreciate you staying up as well, and appreciate you commenting. The Lake Stevens crowd hates us, though. I'm telling you what, we've got more hate from the Lake Stevens crowd than any other crowd. Right? It's not even close. It's like if we don't hand the trophy to Lake Stevens right now.
Yeah, if we had what's his name? J425. Forget. Yeah. If we were to have him on, yeah, he would rip us a new one for sure. He's kind of like their media, their end all be all guy from an independent standpoint that covers everything. But it'd be kind of fun to have him on to, he could root them on. And
yeah, we should get on some sports writers. I'd love to get on Eric Trent or Brandon Huffman, so yeah. I mean, I'd be all down. I like anybody who wants to get on and talk sports and lend their personality. So let's get back to the picks though, real quick. I appreciate the shout out, Auntie M, Uncle Henry. Olympic at home against Bremerton. Now, these are 2 teams that you and I kind of just mentioned. We glossed over it a little bit, but in 2A,
they're kind of fringy, right? I mean, they're fringy, maybe getting into the top 10. I think the winner of this one obviously has a pretty good shot of entering the top 10 rankings next week, depending on maybe what happens near the bottom. I don't know if the loser of Seaholm Cedro deserves to fall out of the top 10, depending on how the result goes. But the winner of this one definitely will start raising some eyebrows and join Hudson's Bay territory. Last year it was 40-13 Olympic, and I got no reason to go against Olympic here in this one. I think that they're going to win this one. I go 31-17.
I got Olympic too. Thought it'd be a close game. Frankly, really don't know anything about either two teams other than their record and who they've played. But I said 2017 Olympic.
Okay. Next one, going back to the Northwest Conference 2A, Tyson's boys, and I guess technically my boys because we both picked them to win the state championship. The Anacortes Seahawks are hosting the Archbishop Murphy Cougars? Cats?
Yeah. Wildcats.
Wildcats? Okay.
Yeah.
It's some type of cat. Right? I thought I had it on the top of my head. Apparently not.
Yeah, Wildcat.
Last year it was at Archbishop Murphy, and last year former coach, now athletic director Justin Ports sold us on the fact that now we're playing a schedule of Northwest Conference. Now we got to play all the tough teams, and he considered it a pretty big game last year going into Archbishop Murphy, coming away with a 21-2 win. Now it's going to be at Anacortes this year. I still am rolling with the Seahawks in this one. However, I do think that Anacortes needs to get back to what they were doing last season, and that's running your nephews into the ground. Anacortes 34, Archbishop 14.
You got a wider spread on it than I do. I think Archbishop has got enough athletes to play good defense against Anacortes. Really, they did last year in that game. That was one of the games I got to watch in person, that one in the Seahelm game. And Archbishop's defense was every bit as just as competitive with them as Cedro Woolley was for that matter. And I think they have a lot better offense. Last week didn't look like it against Linden Christian. I'm not sure what happened, but still got Anacortes. But I think it's going to be a battle for them. I put 27-21. I hope it's a bigger spread than that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it be a one-score game.
All right. So the next one we've got is Enumclaw at Steilacoom, and it's going to be Steilacoom, excuse me, I believe is how I pronounce. I don't know, whatever. It's a name that
Steilacoom, tomato.
I think it's Steilacoom. I think that's what Cooper said last year when we were talking about him, but it doesn't matter. Enumclaw at Steilacoom, both 2-0. Last year it was 56-13 Enumclaw. I don't know, man. I mean, I think Enumclaw is still the better team between the two, and I don't know if they're as good as last year, and I don't know if they're as good as this score, especially now that they're going to go on the road. And Steilacoom used to be a team that was very, very difficult to beat, especially in their building. I mean, that's got to be worth something here, but I'm going to go Enumclaw 31, Steilacoom 24.
I've got Enumclaw 28-13 in this game. Could even be more than that for Enumclaw because so far Steilacoom hasn't given up less than 20-something points. So
we're gross right now. We've only got one game different. Let's go to Clover. Let's go to Clover Park at Fife. Another 2A game. Clover Park 2-0, Fife 1-1. Last year, Fife won the game 37-24. The two schedules that they've played thus far, I mean, aren't like overly impressive to me. But Fife being a playoff team last year and Clover Park really kind of stumbling out, and then I just don't really know what to expect from Clover Park really when you go up against a team that is somewhat decent and mid-ranked, we'll say. So I'm going Fife in this one. and I'm thinking 27-17.
Yeah, I got 20-17 on my end.
All right, next
So
our
at least I'm gonna say
go
at least some of the games we have picked, ironically, we see them with about the same score. So we're on the
we need to come up.
book.
I think honestly, next week we need to come up with some more obscure games that are like truly hard to gauge. Like we need to get like some 1-1 teams, some 1-2 teams, battle of 0-2s, battle of 0-3s. We need to figure out a way to spice up these picks a little bit. Last week I thought we did a really good job in getting games that were super tough to pick. So I mean, we might have a couple differentials here as we wind down, but let's go to our 1A game of the week. And this might be the overall game of the week, if you ask me. I know Bothell Skyview is a real good one, but man, I tell you what, this game was super close last year, Tyson. And it might figure to be just as close this year, if not the complete opposite direction. Nooksack Valley at Kings, the Knights of Kings of Seattle. 25-23 last season in Everson. It's tough to gauge how Kings is going to handle the big guys up front and the Joey Brown and Colton Lentz show. I ultimately am leaning more on the side of Nooksack Valley. I think that the way that they went down and performed in game number 1 against Mountain View on the turf, against a 3A opponent, potentially dealing with cramps and some heat. They had some guys kind of get a little bit worn down and dinged up, and they still survived that game. And after Mountain View beat Ridgefield the way that they did last year, they were up 35-0 in that game. I give Nooksack Valley like all the credit in the world. Meanwhile, with Kings, I think that the story for them in the last couple of years has been, can they beat one of those upper echelon teams? Last year they came so close on the road against Nooksack. Is there momentum there? Can they roll that into this season? And I have a hard time saying yes to it. So ultimately, I chose the more efficient running attack here in Nooksack Valley. And I'm going Nooksack Valley 28, Kings 21.
Yeah, I think Kings has improved over last year. They've had a pretty balanced attack, really. I don't think they've punted in their first 2 games, if I remember right. So they've kind of done whatever they've wanted, passing and throwing. But ultimately, I just think Nooksack is that much better. I think you take like FSP does like a statewide top 25. Nooksack's not on it, I don't think, but I'd legitimately put them in the top 20 against any class.
What does Max Preps have them?
Shoot, I don't know. That's a good question.
I'm just kidding. We don't even need to look. I was just a shot, James.
But honestly, no, I think Nooksack's just that good. 34-17 Nooksack.
Ooh. Yeah, man. I thought you just said Kings was improved. It was a 2-point game last year.
They are, but that's how much better Nooksack is after aging a year and
all right,
gelling.
Well, now you got me kind of wanting to go opposite here, but I'll still stick with Nooksack because I do think that they're better and I do think that they'll win the game. But I think it'll be a little bit closer than that.
I know one that we will disagree on, I think.
I don't know, man. We're pretty good at this, actually, honestly. And not to pat ourselves on the back, but I mean, you only had 4 wrong last week. I had 5 wrong last week. I mean, and one of them was, joint between all of us. So
yeah. Hey, James, in 40 games, if you don't trust my rankings, in 40 games, I'm picking at a 75% clip. So
that's not good. You should be at an 85% clip.
Hey, if I was a baseball team and I was 30-10, I'd be feeling pretty good about it. So not to toot the horn, but I'm in the lead. So what are bragging rights if you don't do a little bit of it?
Save some room on your back for somebody else to pat it. All right, let's go to the 2B game of the week. This one's close. This is like 5 and 6 on your rankings, I think, or 6 and 7. I can't remember off the top of my head.
5 and 6, yeah.
All right, so Riverview of Kennewick taking on Northwest Christian of Colbert. Both teams 2-0 this season. Last year's game between these two teams, 7-6. Riverview won it at home. talk about a low-scoring game. And you know what? Riverview's got a good defense this year too, Tyson. Riverview ended up getting 5 interceptions last week in the win that they had against College Place. And, the guy that you just mentioned earlier in the top performers, Hyatt Clark, he had a really good passing game. He delivered the ball crisply down the field, found guys running in stride, and he kind of dispersed the ball, although one of his targets caught all the touchdowns. But he looked really good. Meanwhile, with Northwest Christian and Colbert, I mean, they're really led by a good wide receiver who can get off the line and get open and downfield in a hurry, and Emmett McLaughlin. I had a really tough time going back and forth with this one. I did message you on that. That was about the only info that we shared with one another, is that you knew that I was having a tough time to pick in this one here. Northwest Christian Colbert's really looking for a big win, and I think that this is the week that they get it. I think they're going to ride the momentum that they've put together over the last season plus since this game against Riverview last year, and I think that they're going to look to take the next step. I'm going to go with Northwest Christian Colbert, and I think it's going to be fairly close. I'm like 21-20, like a very close game.
Yeah, I ultimately chose Northwest Christian as well. They bumped above Riverview with their week 2 win against Reardon and opened the season with a 21-0 win over Chewelah, who originally I had as a top 5 team. So I'm looking to basically that Northwest Christian is going to win that one to kind of back up where I see them in the rankings, and I've got it at 24-21.
Next game, sticking in 2B, Ilwaco at Raymond South Bend. I got to tell you, I mean, I went back and forth on this one a little bit, right? Because on one hand, Ilwaco, in my eyes, I'm not going to say they played a fluff schedule, right? It just looks a little fluffy to me, right? I'm not saying that they're not as good as their defense indicates. Their defense has not given up a single point all year long. And I know a lot of people would look at that on the surface and they'd be like, well, how can you pick against a team that hasn't allowed a point? I mean, North Beach really isn't that good of a team. Toutle Lake, I mean, it remains to be seen how good Morton White Pass is going to be by the time the end of the season is. Your boys Max Prep seems to think that they're pretty good still, but I'm on the fence about that. Raymond South Bend, though, I mean, they've played some tough games over the last few years, and that game at Toledo, they were right there with Toledo until a late score ended up winning that ball game for them. I went with Raymond South Bend in this one. I think that this is going to be a battle of two teams that want to run the ball. Ilwaco is led by Boston Karen at running back, and he was a load to deal with the first 2 weeks for both Toutle Lake and North Shore. This guy runs into contact. It's a tough game to pick, honestly, but I'm going 35-31 Raymond South Bend.
I appreciate your insight on Ilwaco, and I got to say Boston Karen sounds like a nightmare to handle if you think about a Karen from Boston. Yikes. I got Ilwaco 35-32. Raymond South.
Whoa. I said 35-31. You're saying 35-32 for real?
But you chose Raymond South Bend, right?
Yeah. Let's just throw the semantics of that out. I mean,
yeah. I've got Ilwaco, and I have 35-32 written down. I think it's going to be a close game, but it'll be the first test for Ilwaco's defense. But Raymond South Bend has not given up under 29 points in a game, so that's where that comes from. And I'm taking Ilwaco to kind of try to flex their muscles a little and prove it to us.
All right. So without looking, all right, prove to me you know something about Ilwaco, and you're not just picking them. Okay. What's Ilwaco's mascot?
Honestly, I have no idea.
See, now I can't take your pick seriously.
No, it was last week, the Toutle Lake Ducks versus the Ilwaco. They both had to do with water. I remember that at least.
It's the fishermen, bro.
Hey, all I know about Iwako is that they have a huge point differential, and I explained it earlier. If you beat a team 40 to something 0, 40 plus to 0 a game, you're not doing anything wrong. So
no, it's fine. I'm just
I love that his name's Boston Karen. Like,
yeah. Hey, I told you I did research on this game, man. I
I
watched the tape, bro. I mean, it's gonna be a tough game to figure out. Like,
you've got a Farrell Johnson and a Boston Karen in that game.
Yeah. All right.
Both running backs too.
That does it for all the interclassification games. Now let's talk about the crossover games, and then we'll get us out of here. So the first crossover game is a rematch from last year's Lumen Field Showcase games, and it was Glacier Peak against Ferndale at Lumen last year. Well, this year it's at Ferndale. And Glacier Peak absolutely dusted the Golden Eagles last year at Lumen. It was 42-14. This year, Glacier Peak 1-1, Ferndale 2-0. And Glacier is coming off of beatdown at the hands of Camas. 1-1 Glacier Peak against Ferndale 2-0. You know, I don't know, man. I had kind of a hard time with this one because I think Glacier Peak, going off of the result they put together last season and the beating that they took last week from Camas, kind of makes for a dangerous opponent, like that combination. But I ultimately went with Ferndale in this one. I think Ferndale wins this one in a fairly close game. I'm going 24-20 Golden Eagles.
I almost just changed my pick thinking about it and looking at Glacier Peak's first 2 games because their first game against Snohomish was the first time they've ever lost to Snohomish, and I think it's a pretty down year for Snohomish. But ultimately, I wrote down Glacier Peak 20, Ferndale 14. So I'll stick with what I got. My gut instinct said on that one.
You're choosing Glacier Peak?
Yep.
All right. Nice.
A little differentiation there.
Nice. You didn't just change your pick just because of me, right?
No, I got GP circled on my paper. This is from 5 hours ago.
All right.
So,
okay.
And the score. Yep. I just think Ferndale. You don't have to score a lot to beat Ferndale. You just got to score. And I think Glacier Peak has enough firepower. They might get that done, but I could be dead wrong.
All right, let's move on. Lincoln of Tacoma at Camas. Last year, these two teams hooked up as well. And Lincoln won that one 42-28. Auntie M off the top rope with the Macho Man elbow drop. Gee, sucks. Man, Tyson, you're getting killed. Lincoln at Camas. Man, you know, if this was last year's Lincoln team, I'd feel pretty good about picking them on the road. I really would, but it's not. And based on the offensive performances that we've seen so far in the first 2 weeks of the season, I really don't feel very confident in Lincoln going on the road and being able to score enough points against Camas. I know Camas can score points after doing it last week at Glacier Peak. Yeah, Yelm shut him down in the first week, but I feel like a touchdown got, not called correctly in that game that could have won the game for Camas. And then obviously the misexecution on the field goal attempt to win it and walk it off. I think Camas is, 2-0, honestly. I mean, I know that they lost the game, but I don't view that as a loss. I mean, I view that more as a win. And I think that Camas is so much more improved this season, obviously. And I think Lincoln hasn't reached that level of where they were at last year. And I'm sure that Coach Matsumoto is going to be like, fuck these guys, they don't know anything. The only thing that matters is who we are and what we believe. And that's the right attitude. You got to go down and do it. But I ultimately feel that Camas is going to extract some vengeance. And I think it's going to be, a 2-touchdown game. I'm going 34-20.
Yep. I got 38-21 Camas. Want to see Lincoln score some more points before I think that they can, knock off a team like that, because frankly, Camus 8-7 versus Yelm. I think he put Lincoln against Yelm, and it's a 30-point game.
This is a good game for Lincoln to play, though. I mean,
Totally.
it really is. Like, at this point in the season, like, you want to test your team and its limitations and what it can do, and you want to prep the best that you can for league play against Lakes and Spanaway, and then possibly the playoffs and beyond if you get there. So, I mean, this is a great opportunity for Lincoln to at least get some much needed experience for this year's team against
For sure.
So just 3 more games to go over here. Another crossover game is 3A Mountain View at 4A Union. I should notate that these two teams are playing at McKenzie Stadium, which is where they both play. So really there's no road team or any home team. Last year it was 62-35 Mountain View. Mountain View graduated quite a few players, and they introduced a new head coach this year. They got his first win of the year last week against Ridgefield. And again, they were up 35-0 in that game on the road against Ridgefield. Meanwhile, Mountain View, meanwhile, Union, I mean, I don't know if you play a tougher 2 games ultimately. You play O'Day and then you play Yelm. So, I mean, unless you're playing Lake Stevens twice, according to everybody in the comment section here, I mean, there's no possible in the state of Washington. So, I'm giving more respect to Union, I guess, than I probably should. I don't know why. Ultimately, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I think that Union wins the game just due to the competition that they've played thus far. I think Mountain View is going to look and feel a lot more beatable as the game starts and goes on for Union, and I think that that's going to be enough to get the win. I mean, 21-20, it's going to be close.
Yeah, I chose Union also, even though they're 0-2. I'm just kind of impressed with the fact they scored 34 on Yelm. Granted, I don't know without watching it could have been against Yelm's JV or backup for a lot of those points. But, yeah, I think overall it'll be a close game too, 28-20 Union.
Next game is the Kelso Highlanders at the Tumwater Thunderbirds. These two teams, again, hooked up last year, and it was at Kelso. Tumwater won that one 38-19. Tumwater, much better. Kelso, not quite as good. This one's easy. Tumwater, 44-20.
Yep, Tumwater, 35-17 for me. Yeah, we pretty much – I'm going to go out on a limb here and say our real games of the week are Ilwaco, Raymond South Bend, and Cedro and Seahome, because that's the only 2 we've differed on.
We got one more here. Kalama at La Center. Last season, it was 49-24 La Center. That game was at Kalama. Thank you, James, for subscribing. We greatly appreciate you. The Chinooks, baby. I tell you what, like, they're a team that's going to continuously get better, throughout the year. And these first 3 games that they're playing are just about as tough as, you could want as a 2B school. Aiden Brown gives me hope here. Ethan Brightbill gives me hope here. They got some firepower, Tyson. They may have enough firepower to win a lot of games this year. I think this is a closer game than a lot of people might think. But ultimately, I think that the physicality and the run game and the ball control aspect of La Center is going to be a little bit too much. But ultimately, I would not be shocked to see Kalama hang around. I'm going 34-24 La Center.
Yeah, I've got La Center too. I think, I like those athletes, Aiden Brown and Brightbill from Kalama, but I want to say La Center's got probably 3 or 4 guys capable of playing on the outside that can run with those 2. Maybe not Aiden. He's pretty special, but either way, they're just deeper, bigger, good physical football team. I've got it at 38-13 La Center. I think it starts out tight in the first say quarter and a half. The center maybe gets a score to go up by, say, 10 points or something going into halftime, and then it just kind of shuts Kalama down in the second half and overwhelm them. So that's as they should, really, being a bigger school and, as high as we both are on them. Not that we're down on Kalama. They're much improved over last year.
No, I'm not down on them at all. They could be the best 1 and 2 team in the state for all I know next week.
For sure.
Unless Camus loses.
For sure.
I mean, they're, top to bottom, pound for pound. I mean, when you return, I think it's 18 seniors or 18 starters, I should say, from last year's team to this year's team. I mean, that's about as good as you could ever hope for at any year. Like, very rarely are you going to return that many starting guys on both sides of the ball. And again, having played, Woodland in week 1, 2 classifications higher, and then playing Castle Rock last week and getting the win, I love the direction that Kalama is going, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Brown's only a sophomore, right?
Junior, I think, but I don't know for sure. I think junior.
I think he might be 2025. Let's see.
That would be a
2025 athlete. Yep.
Yeah, that would be a junior. Yeah.
Yep.
I think I had that one.
Yeah, he's a stud. So yeah, all in all, unless Devin differs from us and kicks our butts,
we only got 2 different.
Yeah, Cedro, Seahome, and Ilwaco, Raymond, South Bend, which frankly I think we could have had more than that different. It's just after paying such close attention for 2 weeks, we're pretty like-minded guys about a lot of things, so it doesn't surprise me.
Well, I mean, just like, I struggle going back and forth on it. I wouldn't be shocked if we're both wrong on a couple of games. I think that there's a couple of them that, I think the Mount Lake Terrace and Shorewood game, could go either way in some capacities. I mean, if you're going off of last year's score in that one, Mount Lake Terrace, shouldn't have any problem. But, I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns with some teams, and we've seen teams that weren't that great last year, like last week, for instance. We ran into the Stanwood Pilchuck thing. It's
right.
Like you never know. Like Pilchuck just came out and just absolutely took them out back and whooped them. So, I mean, we do differ on Ilwaco and Raymond South Bend, but I mean, Riverview could beat Northwest Christian Colbert pretty easily. I mean, I could see that game either way. Olympic and
Skyview.
Yeah, Bothell Skyview. I mean, there's some games that might be difficult here, and North Creek and Mount Si. I mean, there's games that are close. I just ultimately think that we're just going off of trends and film and what we've seen so far, and
yep, for sure.
I mean, it's just what you get. I don't know. I think it's just more coincidence than anything else that we see things through the same lens, pretty much like this week, because we've had plenty of weeks where we differ, so.
Right. Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, even last week, I only got one more game more than you, and I think the games that we had were actually much different games overall. So it's just the way the cookie crumbled this week.
Yeah, I think we only missed on one game combined. Like then that was the Stanwood Pilchuck game. I think every other game that you lost on, I had the other way, and vice versa. So
right. Yep, definitely.
But
yeah. No, all in all, good show. We covered a lot of stuff. 3 hours, 21 minutes. That's about our norm.
Bro, what are you talking about? It's 3 hours and 42 minutes. What's your gorilla math? This is like almost like a fucking lunch entire show here.
Mine says 321 for some reason in the top left. I don't know why.
Yeah, it is for some reason. I tell you that much.
Maybe I don't know. Weird. Maybe my clock on my computer's slow.
Your gorilla math is off.
Yeah, it's the Max Preps effect.
Yeah, it was about as off as the Seahawks during the second half of last week's game.
I don't even want to talk about that game anymore. I could go find 100 offensive linemen in Washington State that'd be better than Jake Curhan.
Who?
The backup right tackle.
Exactly.
Yeah, trash.
That's okay.
Yeah. We'll talk. Better luck next week.
Yeah. Next week we might have some coaches on the show again. So, yep.
Yep. Stay tuned.
We got so much to cover, man. And I wish we could like do it down to like 2 shows, maybe a week or something like that, and split it up. And I don't know, but what did you think of the highlight video? Did you catch the Tecmo Bowl?
Yeah,
intro?
Yeah, I loved it.
What do you think about that? Was that pretty good?
I think it's great. We definitely need to. If you have it as one full clip, we definitely need to upload it.
Yeah, I can check to see. Let me check and see how big it is and what the time is on it, because that'll tell me how. I don't know what the rules are for Twitter, like about how much you.
You can have a couple minutes, because I've seen kids post highlights from games that were this long.
It's 2 minutes and 34 seconds. I think that's like right near there. So
I think you'd be okay.
Yeah. Seahawks are playing Detroit. Good luck with that. Yeah, you know what? I think the Seahawks win that game, honestly. Like I don't know why.
So.
I don't know why, but it's like when you got DK like getting targeted 5 times and Puka Nacua getting targeted like 16 times, you know, it's like you go to the film room, right? And you're like, why are we not throwing the ball to this monster?
Yeah.
You know? Like I think that they're just gonna force that guy the ball. I love Kenneth Walker on turf, like indoor turf, like for some reason. And Gino played I'm not going to say a terrible game, but a not good game. And I think that the key to winning that game for the Seahawks is simple. It's can they block Aiden Hutchinson? And
yeah,
the best way to do that is to run block, not worry about pass blocking.
And stop the run.
Yeah, where was Jackson Smith Najimba, like the Jimba or whatever? Like, what the hell was that? Like, I thought with that guy, he's a first-round pick, got 2 catches for 11 yards. You know, my fantasy team hated him.
Yeah, just don't think Gino had enough time. And I don't know. I liked some of their play calling in the second quarter, and I don't know. It's almost like Shane Waldron started like seeing like from the water boy. He looks across the sideline. He wasn't seeing the baby anymore.
Right.
All of a sudden, he was seeing Sean McVay as like,
yeah,
daddy.
I like that reference. That's good.
Yeah. So hopefully it gets better. But Dan Campbell's even more intimidating than McVay. So I don't know.
Hey,
we'll see.
Hey, Detroit gave us one last year. How they didn't make the playoffs was because they lost that game to Seattle last year. So I mean, I'm sure that they're going to be out for it this week. But I mean, the Seahawks know. You know, it's so hard to bounce back after being 0-2. You know, they're gonna come out and do everything that they can to win that game. So I mean, we'll see how it goes.
I think we need Walker to go for 100 to get a win,
and
we need Bobby Wagner to be.
We historically do terrible against like quarterbacks like Goff, you know, guys that like aren't elite. You know, we have a tendency of letting them eat us up and stuff, but it's like, yeah, we better figure something out. Like I think they'll come out and play pretty well, honestly. That was just an absolute stinker yesterday. You know, like it's not very often that a team turns in a clunker like that with, you know, some expectations and, you know, re-signing Bobby Wagner and then drafting a shutdown corner, first-round pick. You know, it's like outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's like, what does Detroit like really have that scares you on weapons? But then again, what did the Rams have that scared you as weapons?
Exactly.
Yeah.
David Montgomery is like Chris Carson from the way he runs. Gibbs is a stud.
Could be if he runs if they run the ball with him more, absolutely. But I'm talking like wideouts. Like, but if you look at what the Rams had with Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell and Van Jefferson's, like Van Jefferson's got to be like the absolute worst, like number 1, 2, whatever, like flip-flop that he is. It's like Puka Nacua just straight took the number 1 job in one game, if you ask me, like as a rookie. Like he did more in one game than Van Jefferson has done in his entire career.
Puka's a traitor.
Yeah, Tutu yeah. I mean, who cares? Get him out of here.
He transferred to BYU. That's worse than just as bad as transferring to the Ducks in my book.
Yeah, well, whatever. We whooped them. So, all right. Well, I think that honestly, the more intriguing game is like how funny is it though that both teams from Seattle are in the state of Michigan, right? With Washington going to play with Michigan State, like that's way more of a entertaining game to me than the Seahawks and the Lions. Like, I think that honestly, this whole like the Mel Tucker thing is stupid and bad and good and bad, and I mean, it's good from a standpoint of like you really get to kind of like dig deep into the intricacies of like the accusations behind it and like who instigated it and what happened, because it's two completely different sides of the story here. I mean, obviously you have to sit him down and suspend him while an investigation's going, just because of the accusations in general. I mean, you gotta take your protocol and take it seriously. But I think it works like two ways. It's like from a football standpoint, like college players are for the most part like fairly brainwashed to their head coach, to their culture, and they'll go along with just about anything. And without him, I mean, they could play, inspired, or they could play a lot better because they got a better coach all around. I mean,
I think this is something that's been coming for a while. Jeremy Bernard went to Michigan State after committing to UW and then transferred this offseason. I think somebody must have known something a while back. I think he'll have a big game, though, with that being said.
I'll say this. If the accusations are true that he instigated it, I mean, he's bold. I mean, talk about picking your target and not, just going against the grain completely,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bold strategy, Cotton. I don't know if I'd go with that one on that route, especially being married. I mean, that's just like the dumbest thing about it. It's like,
it's commonplace for college coaches these days.
But still, it's like, have some decency, man. It's like, think about what you're doing. It's like, it affects so much more than you and your ego and whatnot. It's like, you got there's so many different avenues of disappointment for you. Like,
there's a lot of famous college coaches out there that make really poor life decisions.
Oh, remember Bobby Petrino? Oh my God. Oh,
or Jerry Sandusky, or
Urban
Meyer, or Lane Kiffin, you name it. There's a lot of like, let's just say they aren't like Corey Sampson, Deontay Cooper type dudes leading these kids.
There's a bunch of greaseballs. I mean, it's not. I mean, throw Pat Fitzgerald into the mix too. It's like, I mean, if you're gonna, obviously you're gonna throw Sandusky in there. I mean, you got to put Joe Paterno in the same breath and the same time.
Oh, sure.
It's like there's so many of them that have had like improprieties and stuff like that. And the thing that's really crazy is that people talk down on Deion Sanders, right? And like Deion's done nothing but just like win, and sure, he's got like some bravado and he's blusterous about it and stuff, but he
always has been.
Yeah, he ain't out there doing this. Like, he ain't out there he's not embarrassing your program in ways that somebody else is, like the Mel Tuckers of the world. It's like, even Steve Sarkisian had, his fair share of issues before he got on track with Saban and going to Texas and stuff. And even last year in the game that they played against UW, and like, he went completely berserk before the game started on some production assistant for the TV network who was like a little handsy, but still, it's like, there's just college football, man. It's just weird, man. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a lot of, not the best examples out there. Yeah. For sure. Well, let's wrap this thing up. 11:23.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is absurd.
We'll get Devin's picks in and get them all. I agree with you, Auntie. Broncos quarterback has sucked and still sucks and will continue to suck. Even his own coach is already sick of him. I'm so glad we don't have to talk about that guy anymore. I'm not even going to say his name.
Yeah, Sean Payton had his foot out the door before he had his foot in the door.
Yeah, he's gonna have his foot somewhere else. They keep losing.
All right, bro. I appreciate you as always putting in all the hard work this week. Going over all the picks. I appreciate all the audience. Everybody type it into the comment section. We need more of it. Share with your friends, share with your family. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the follow button, subscribe button, middle finger button, all of it. So
Auntie and James keep bringing the fire.
yeah,
Love
we
it.
love it. Yep.
Yeah, it made it more fun.
All right, buddy.
All right, have a good night. Good night, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
All righty. Cheers.